I'll just park it here, and if you need it, let me know.
Great. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 15th Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. First on our agenda is public input. Open it up for any public input. And seeing none, I will close public input. Next, we have review and additions to tonight's agenda. Any members have any review or additions to tonight's agenda? Okay. Correspondence. I'm going to quickly go through the correspondence that Ms. Stevens sent over to me earlier today. Mr. Sullivan will make sure we attach these to our minutes. Correspondence since last week's meeting. So on December 9th, Chair Sun shared the agenda for the December 15th committee meeting. On December 9th, Town Administrator Kleiner provided the committee with a list of previous warrant articles dating back to 1964. On December 11th, Mr. Sullivan shared the draft meeting minutes from the December 8th meeting. On December 12th, Ms. Kleiner updated the committee that the town budget is currently $6,427 under the tax cap due to a change in employee insurance elections. On December 14th, Ms. Kleiner shared the town's draft warrant articles, information on a statutory change to property tax credits for veterans, and a memo detailing changes to the 2023 budget and concerns about cuts made to the fire and police department budgets. Also on December 14th, Ms. Hirschberger shared the school district's November financial reports. On December 14th, Seth Miller of One Hale Way asked where to find the draft 2023 town budget and the approved 2022 town budget. Ms. Stevens responded with links to the town webpage. The draft and approved budgets can be found under the 2023 town meeting menu at the top of litchfieldnh.gov. And then finally on December 14th, Ms. Hirschberger shared the school district's draft warrant articles. And then today on December 15th, Mr. Totten reshared the school BA report and PDFs of the November financials. It captures our correspondence since last week. Next, we have review and acceptance of minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review our minutes from last week?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
A motion by Mr. Bort to approve the minutes from December 8th. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Second from Ms. Douglas.
I just have a question, though. That actually starts on page 8. It has all to do with the special services.
Yeah, give me just a second to pull it up. Page 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay.
And I may be incorrect, but the first motion passed 6-2. Correct? That's what it says in the notes anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then right below that it says Mr. Taylor, Mr. Hayes, motion to amend. It really wouldn't be a motion to amend, correct? It's making another motion. And then it says that after the next one, it says the same thing.
No, I think we did the initial motion to amend first. It wrapped back around to the original one. Because you see there was no vote on the amendment, and then there was one that failed.
The original motion was the 51,800.
And according to the notes, it passed 6-2.
Which is correct. And then it went to
I thought that was the last vote, though.
100. It was the
Voted
last
on
vote.
the other two amounts first.
I think it's
and
just
then
out
that
of
was the
order.
last amount,
I think
yeah.
it's out of order there
Yeah,
because
something's
then
not
we
right, because then you keep saying.
the 157
amend.
was next, then it was
Yeah.
100,
Yeah,
and then
the
we
next
took
one.
the vote on the 51.8, which was what was 6-2.
Right.
Okay.
We had this discussion last year about something like this, and it was just, and Mr. Sullivan had a reason why the original motion was at the top and then the amendments. But you're right, timeline, it reads backwards,
Right.
but I can't remember what the reason was. I think we have to talk to him.
So, how about I'll follow up with Matt on that, and if we need to make
It's confused. I mean, if anyone were to read these, it's like, I know what transpired, but it's, in reading this, it's like, you know, you amend a motion that's already passed.
Right. No, I agree. When you read it this way, I agree. So, motion to approve and seconded pending explanation from Mr.
You
Sullivan.
want to just table it, or?
We can we would
No, I
want to
don't
table
have a
it.
problem going forward, to be honest with you. I mean, it's all there. It's just the way it's worded in the order it's in.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0-1. And just for a note, Mr. Barca is not with us this evening. He had a work conflict for this evening. All right, with that, we're moving into tonight's business. And just to kind of recap for everybody where we are in our budget process. So we've spent the better part of the last 6 weeks with the school going through their budget process. Prior to that, several weeks on the town side. We're now at the point in our process where both the town and the school are going to present warrant articles to us. Tonight is just presentation, opportunity for us to listen, ask clarifying questions. We do not take any action on any votes for warrant articles until our January 5th meeting, okay? So we have the school going first tonight, and then after the school goes through, we can ask questions on each warrant article. They'll present each of theirs, and then we'll turn it over to the town to present their warrant articles as well.
Okay, so I guess maybe this should have been brought up during review in addition to the agenda then. When will we get a chance to receive the answers to the questions that were asked and are outstanding?
Let's do that under member input new business, because I've got that pulled up. You're talking about the questions from December 8th?
Well, the ones that are outstanding, and there were some follow-ups from last week, so.
I've got those pulled up
perfect.
too. Yep, so we'll do that under member input new business. Does that
Okay,
work?
that works for me, I just want to make sure it doesn't get lost.
Yep. All right, so with that, we'll turn it over to the school for warrant article presentations. Everyone should have received those from Ms. Hirschberger, and I believe there's 5 of them that are on there for our review. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Jetty and Mr. Taunton.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Good evening. So this is a draft warrant. It went to the school board last night for the first time. We got some feedback from the board, and the board will be contemplating what they want to vote upon at their next meeting, which is on January the 4th. So at this time, it's a draft, but this is the current thinking of where we stand. So just quickly on school district offices, we are in need of electing a moderator for a 3-year term, a school district clerk for a 3-year term, and a school board member, one school board member for a 3-year term. So remember the board elections, sometimes we vote for 2 board members. This is the 1 year, or the 1 board member year. So that's 1 seat that is up for the year to come. So that'll be on the warrant. Then for Article 1, it's the standard operating budget numbers. You can see that we have a series of X's filled in there because we're working on 2 things. Actually, you're working on one of the things, which is filling in what the first series of X's will be, which is the proposed budget from the Budget Committee. And then the default number, Mr. Totten's been working very hard. He attended a workshop recently, had a consult with the school district attorney today to clarify a few points. And we're working on that number, which will be brought forward to the school board for approval to be placed on Article 1.
So when will we see it?
Which one?
The default budget?
As soon as we get it done and bring it forward to the school board, which will be a January 4th meeting, we hope.
So just so everyone's aware too, there will be an opportunity for us as a budget committee to vote on, to make any changes to the proposed, to our budget, to the school budget at our January 5th meeting. So that evening when we're voting on warrant articles, there's also still an opportunity. The January 4th is when they're presenting their warrant articles for the school board to vote. But at that January 5th meeting will be any final opportunities for us to make any potential changes to the school budget. And then that's the number we'll lock in and vote on.
And
We need to
town
be-
budget.
Well, yes,
And the
soon.
town, yeah.
but I think we need to be clear that we need that default budget in order, I'm gonna tell you straight up, I think this number's inflated, so if I wanna know what my options are. So I need to see the default budget before I vote on the proposed budget. So, there's no reason we shouldn't, I mean, we've traditionally had it by now. So the fact that we're saying possibly January 4th, I'm sorry, but it needs to be no later than January 4th. It needs to be here.
Well, the school board has to vote on it.
Well, I'm sorry, but is it a surprise we need a default budget?
No, I'm just saying.
Yes, there's subject to debate certain ways of interpreting it, but it's a formula.
But isn't there stuff that changed that you heard on the webinar yesterday that it's not as perhaps straightforward as
I think
Ms. Kleiner shaking her head?
There have been some recent changes, and the other thing is that even in the webinar, portions of that were aimed at towns and portions at the school, and that's why we needed to seek legal advice today, just to clarify exactly, what are the edges of the rules, if you would. And so we need to know, how does that apply in a school setting? And we learned there are some differences between schools and municipalities. So the other thing is, in fairness, we have a new business administrator who's never gone through the development of a default budget process. So I just would ask for a little bit of grace as we try to make sure we have the correct number in there. So, and it is the school budget's, or the school board's ultimate decision on what that number is. So we're working on it.
I think when the school board votes on this on January 4th, then that evening, we send it over to the budget committee so that we have it in advance of the January 5th meeting. That's a fair ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I've been sending you guys stuff from the meeting.
After
we looked at it.
I didn't get a chance to attend yesterday's webinar, but I read a lot of the stuff, the summary documents, and I think, and Ms. Kleiner can probably articulate this maybe better than I can, but I think there were ways that default budgets have been calculated in the past that may not have been entirely.
No, there are definitely ways default budgets have not been calculated correctly. It's been open to interpretation and very loose. And my hope is they tighten that up.
Well, one of the
Remove the
big
ambiguity.
takeaways, I attended it, and one of the big takeaways I got was that the default budget needs to be presented not just as a number, but with the codes, like line by line, what's added and what's taken away, and there needs to be an opportunity for questions and answers at the first town meeting, right? So that, it's a very different approach. It's not, here's the number, it's really, here's the explanation of the proposed budget, and here's the explanation of the default
Which is
budget
different
as
than the way
well.
we've done it since I've been
Detailing it out, and anybody can ask questions, and they should be receiving answers too about how it was
Presentation
calculated.
might be different, but annually we receive a report that says, what are the one-time expenses that have been removed? What are the ads? What are the contracts? We get that, we're supposed to have that anyway. Maybe it's different
Supposed
that
to.
we have to present, we've been
Yeah.
receiving that in advance of Christmas. So you sat
Have
there.
some grace,
well,
please, have
I
some
just-
grace.
No, I'm sorry, this is not a
Doug's
surprise.
first year.
I understand that, and I get that, but it's not his first year. It's not your first year. It's just, to me, there's a timeline. It's been posted. I get it. You've been dealing with a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, how do we make informed decisions when we're not given the information to make them? You want us to support your stuff, but we can't do that as an educated voter without the information to be educated. You sat there in a meeting several weeks ago saying that there's a difference in tone between how the budget committee treats the town versus how they treat the school. And quite frankly, this is part of the reason. I don't have to wait for answers from the town. I still don't have answers that I've asked you guys before. So if there is, yes, I have a lot more patience when I know I'm getting the answers. When I feel like I'm being stonewalled, I'm not as patient. So please get the default budget so we can take a look at it and make an educated choice. Please get answers to the questions that have been outstanding.
Carrie, out of curiosity, how much time are you gonna spend studying the default budget once you receive it?
Do you
need
know?
more than 8 hours?
Why should I? That's not up to me.
You're gonna get it before we vote on it.
We're supposed to have a meeting before we vote on it. So I'm not getting the extra meeting. You're supposed to present it one week and then vote the next. I'm not being given that. If it's given to me on the night of the 4th, then I have to take a look at it on the 5th. This is why we have problems with the LMS project, because it was an 11th hour decision to drop it. This is going to be an 11th hour decision to drop the default budget. This is, to me, it's a process issue that needs to be addressed on the school side.
Okay. let's stay focused on task at hand tonight.
So I would like to respond to that if I can, tactfully. Carrie, I think we've done a very good job answering questions, okay? We've facilitated a new process, and I could tally up the questions. I mean, there's probably at least 100 different intense questions, not yes or no questions, that have been thoroughly answered, okay? And there's a difference between answering a question
I would
and answering the question the way you
answer.
want it answered.
Thoroughly, and the answers we've received, we can agree to disagree on the quantification of the information that's been provided.
There are still some outstanding questions around the LMS project that I know that you asked, that I think we were asked to get through this portion of the process and get those answered. So I know that may be part of what you're referring to.
It's just, again.
And there were dozens that were answered, so
There were
we're
questions
doing our
regarding
best.
the
We are
budget.
making progress. I feel like we've done better than we have in the past,
I-
and we'll look to improve it every year.
I will graciously disagree with that assessment. There are outstanding budget questions from last week.
Those are
They're all
answered. Yeah,
answered.
they're all answered.
Where? I never received an email with answers.
They're in the document.
We are gonna have to
In the
discuss this
document.
process, because this process stinks. So I'm not,
It's one document. It's a continuing document. It seems like it would be easy to follow that.
it's,
The
well,
document was sent out by the Budget Committee, and we've just been answering the document as it's come in.
we're gonna have to address that as it goes forward, because to me, that's not the way this should be done at all. There should be responses issued to the questions that are then archivable. A running document is not easily accessible to the public. It's a good working document, but it's not how we should be operating.
Matthew's been putting
He
them in
attaches
each
it to the
week.
minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I'm glad you guys are finding that acceptable. I do not. So let's move forward.
We can move forward. All right. Anything else on?
I like the fact it's all in one spot.
I like the fact it's all in one
Yeah,
spot
it's
because
easier
I
to
think
find
it
them.
captures all of our
Search for them.
budget questions in one spot. Yes, and I think one of the changes we did this last year. I think one of the things that we didn't do last year was, one, read the questions out loud in public so that people could hear questions and answers, and two, make sure that they were attached to the minutes for that transparency piece. And I think we've added both of those layers this year to make sure that the town hears the questions and the answers, and they're attached to the minutes if they want to go back and
Sure.
find them.
Last year, I got emailed responses to my questions. I didn't have to go searching for them as a scavenger hunt, so I don't like that. I
And
don't.
and to be fair, these are different. These questions are questions that come up during these meetings, and not an email question like Mr. Hayes sent me a question earlier asking about, taking a tour of the
Right,
property.
but this goes back to the other situation where if questions are asked in a meeting of the town, you get responses I don't have to wait till the next meeting for an answer. I don't have to go searching for the answer. It's like, oh, here's the answer to your question. Awesome. Great. So I have, it's fine. If it's incumbent upon me every week to do that, so be it. I will bookmark the link. I don't think that's the appropriate way of doing it.
And that's fine. And that's a process we can discuss for next year. If this works or it doesn't work, then we can find something that works for everybody. All right. Anything else on Article 1?
I do have a question about Article 1.
Yes.
Is there an expectation that either the budget that we finalize or the default budget may result in a reduction in the tax rate? Is there a reason why that one there has reduction of?
So it's a template.
Okay.
guess
It's
it's
just the other ones don't say anything about reduction, so that's why I was
It's
just curious.
hopeful.
I think it must have just been a copy from something, so.
Yeah, I think it's just, it could result in that.
Okay. Article 2?
All right, so Article 2. Article 2 is the land article. So basically, the question here is not the exact wording. The attorneys are still taking a look at the purchase and sales agreement. There's a provision in there about the naming rights of the eventual school. We want to make sure that we have the right wording on the warrant article. I had emailed the attorney a while ago, but I can only imagine they're getting emails from everybody. So I did a follow-up email reminder today, and I'm hoping to get the final answer tomorrow. But the gist of it is what's there. It's to raise and appropriate the $497,000. Remember, the yeah, the selling price is 5,000, but the school board had to put down.
500,000,
500,000. What did I say?
5,000.
Bear
In which
with me.
case, I'll
Hey,
cut
I'm
you a
not,
check.
I'm not 100%, I'm not feeling well, so bear with me here. Just add some zeros, it's good. But the 500,000, the school board did have to put down a $3,000 non-refundable deposit because there were some legal matters that needed to be addressed. So the balance is 497. It's for the 35 acres. You heard my description earlier of what that property sort of looks like, where it's located, and then the question that may be added in there is just the naming rights component for the Robin Riley Elementary School. And so I'm still unclear on whether that needs to be a part of the warrant article, and we'll wait for the attorney to advise on that.
So, question on this one. Is there any money in that fund balance that was created at the end of last year for the purposes of purchasing land? Or, it doesn't explicitly say purchasing land, but the school board made the pitch that it was intended for purchasing land. Is there money in that account?
The capital improvement for the.
No, warrant Article 8,
It was the one that got amended at town meeting,
that
right?
raised
So
like,
the amendment on the floor was illegal. So what occurred when it went off to DRA, there's no provision in the statute that allows anything other than the 5% contingency. So it got amended on the floor to 1/4% or whatever
Yep.
the number was. That's illegal. It's 5% or 0.
All right,
You
so it's
either
0?
accept it at 5 or you vote against it.
why?
That's the way the law is written. So there's no ability for the town to say, oh, we'll only do 1/4. So the fact that that occurred, and the attorney didn't pick up on it, I mean, he was in the meeting, they just said, that's invalid, it doesn't matter what people voted on it, it's an illegal warrant article, so we got 0. So there's no money, because
Alright.
it wasn't put aside.
All right, no,
And
that was
that's-
my question. If there was, the intention was that was going to be towards land, then then I would expect that. And then if it's, doesn't exist technically, then it doesn't have to be repealed, so we're good.
I heard last night's school board meeting, I think it was a question that Ms. Stevens had sent in about I'm gonna paraphrase, correct me if I'm wrong, if it didn't pass, if this passed, but the building didn't pass the next 2 years, what was the plan for the land and whether it went into conservation or whatever? That was
It wasn't 2 years. I'm talking like
oh, okay.
way down the road,
Got it.
because I'm.
Yeah, so we don't even
thinking
want to talk about that, because
it
it's
would
gonna
be-
pass. We're gonna get a school there eventually, so.
I think, and I'm just saying, I think that's something important, in my opinion. I think for the voters to know that, yes, I think this is a good deal for this piece of property, for the size of the property, for the location, all of that. I don't think anybody questions that. I think most people will probably look at this as a good investment. The building side of it is a totally different conversation. I
Exactly.
think what people want to know is, well, what happens if the building doesn't? And I don't even know from a legal standpoint if that has to be a part of the warrant article. Maybe it's a part of the explanation that goes out.
Well,
Or,
the question would be, because the assumption is, part of the per sale price is the naming rights. If there's no building to name, then do we have to fund the difference of the sale price? Do we have to buy back the naming rights because?
So
we don't
there's
have
no
building to name?
provision in the purchase and sales that gets at any of that. So all of the purchase and sales is silent on it. It's
Right.
just, here's the price. Well, I shouldn't say it's just, there's like 26 provisions in a purchase and
Right.
sales. But it really doesn't speak to that question. And so, I think the answer would be that if the voters approve it, the school district, the voters of Litchfield now own that piece of property. And then the intent is to build a school and to name it after Robin Riley. And anything other than that, I think somebody could come back and say, that's not what we voted when we bought it, that's not why we voted for it. So, if the voters never approved the school, never approved the bond, I think it sits until somebody figures out what you do with it when the intent was to build a school with a name on it.
Well, that's what I was getting at, was if it sits, say it sits for another decade, or if for some reason something changes and a new building isn't the plan anymore, for whatever the reason, I just think as a good faith effort that, like, that piece of land is probably one of the most valuable pieces of land to the town, because the master plan is trying to get the center of town on Albuquerque here, and naturally the schools should follow that. So I would like to see some decision by the school board of, this is what will happen with this land if this were not, if for some reason, like unforeseen circumstances, a building was never built.
It's good to address it before it becomes a contentious issue. Because
Right,
like,
because
because
I
the
don't want to
person,
see it sold and then a neighborhood be built on it. you
Yeah,
know,
so I
because-
think two things. The school board can't make that decision because the voters, the school district owns it, right? So ultimately, it's the legislative body that would have to dispose of property, decide to sell the property or something, so.
I think that's what she's saying though, like if in 10, 15 years there's no school, is there a triggering mechanism to transfer it to the conservation, since it's the taxpayers who purchased it, they don't really care whether it's the left pocket or the right pocket, they paid for it. So is there a
So
way?
there's not a trigger mechanism. It would be up to a future legislative body to decide.
It would have to be a
But then the
what they
question
wanted to do
then
with it.
would become, would it be set, if the purchase price is the $500,000 plus naming rights, and in 15 years, for whatever reason, there's no school, can the legislative body say, hey, we want to move it to the conservation committee, or do we still owe then, do we have to buy back the naming rights because there's nothing to name?
Again, the purchase and sales is silent. You're
So-
asking a hypothetical that's not addressed in it, and
I'm just saying, I think you should address it.
What the school board does have control over is putting forth a warrant article to sell the land. So, yes, the legislative body would make that decision, yes or no, but I would rather it not, that article never be an option.
and clearly, I mean, Mrs. Riley's intent is for it to be used for a town purpose, right? It's not for, the next, I don't know, Southview or whatever's next to be developed on it, right? So, I think that's something that, again, the town is gonna have to reconcile, because it's not in, as far as I can tell, and I can follow this up with the attorney, but I don't think there's any provision in there. It's really up to the school district, the voters who own that.
Well, and that's what I'm asking, will the school board put something forward that will, some sort of agreement or something? We'll tie.
So how long have you been
Future
negotiating
boards to
this?
that.
Let's just back up to that, okay?
we've
This
been
has been a long time negotiating.
I'm not talking about the purchase and sale. It's some
It sounds
kind of
like you guys
policy or
are.
something where the school board just makes some sort of promise that 10, 15 years down the road, a school board isn't going to, would it be a brand new school board probably at that point, right? Wouldn't consider putting that land up for sale. For, is it Mrs. Riley? At that point, maybe Mrs. Riley isn't in town anymore or something. So there's no way to go back and talk to her about her original intent with that land.
Well, there is the purchase and sale that has the original intent on it, and in that there are naming rights as part of the value.
Right, no, but you just said there's nothing in there that says it can't be sold for residential use.
And is it naming rights for the school or
Right,
any
it's
other
just if a
purpose
school
they come
was
up
built.
with? If it's the school, then the naming rights would stop if the school was not built.
Right.
Right? Unless something is written in the purchase and sale agreement that says it's forever, no matter what the use, there's naming rights.
Kate, let me follow up with the attorneys on it, because, I'm thinking of like a memo of agreement, or the school board says, this is what they intend, but then a member of the school district gets 24 friends to sign a petition, and now we have a petition warrant article to do something. So I just think we need to really kind of flesh this out now. If that's really a concern for folks, I mean, it's something that, let me have the attorneys try to hammer out what the right response is. Because, I know what the intent, we all know what the intent
Yes.
is, and we don't want to see 30 new houses on that property. That's not why that land is being sold. It is being sold to educate the children into the future. And so we have to honor that and make sure legally that we're protected for it. So let me work on it with the attorneys.
Okay,
What
thank
I would
you.
like to see is a physical description of the property, wetlands, dry land, slope, and everything like that. I think that's important.
So we're doing two things, Bill, to address that. So if you go to the Reimagining GMS website, which the link is in the answers to the questions that are on the Google Doc, under important documents, it's the press release and it's also the purchase and sales agreement, so you can read that in full. I got permission from the board last night to also post the appraisal that we had done, which gets into more detail about the property, and it's pretty detailed, and it explains how they came up with a value of $745,000 for the land. So you can read that. The other thing is the board authorized us to proceed ahead and conduct what's called a fatal flaw report, and that's where Nobis Engineering will come in and they will conduct a site review of it. Maybe we can actually walk along with them when they're doing it. That wouldn't be a bad idea. And they'll map it out. And it's not a highly detailed, plot plan by any stretch, but it's a fatal flaw. In other words, there's not a toxic waste site that sits out there. There's not, so they'll just kind of go through and conduct that report. They'll say, there's a missing boundary. We couldn't find the boundary. So when this gets surveyed, we're gonna have to make sure the boundary's placed in there. So I think the voters need to know if there's anything fatal about that property before they vote on it.
Which should include an idea of what the development cost would be for instance.
What the
development cost of that land. Land development, I mean, that can be very expensive. It can be inexpensive or very expensive.
Yep.
It can be price prohibitive for that piece of
If you
property.
end up finding out that there's like granite and there's a lot of blasting involved, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, one of the things when we walked it, we didn't find a single rock on the property. I mean,
The chances are on that side, you'll see more sand than rock.
and that's what our
Drainage.
that's what our architect felt when he walked it, and he obviously develops schools. This is what he does. He builds schools, right? So he walked it, and we're looking for any sign of a boulder. There was nothing out there until suddenly we found an odd piece of granite as the back corner bound. So we did find that boundary, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, there's a rock. Well, guess why? It's a perfectly square cut 1800s chunk of granite that got placed out there.
I would expect there to be a lot of drainage because that comes from Rocky Hill. Basically, everything is flowing down to 3A and to the river. So as we walk it, that's what I'll be looking at. The best times to walk it are now and early spring. High water table, all of those things.
So I'll be reaching out tomorrow to Nobis and seeing how quickly they can get that scheduled, and maybe tag teaming that is not a bad.
Just real quick, you mentioned as a part of Mr. Hayes' question, the purchase and sales agreement is on that Reimagining GMS site. I found that. There was something else you said too.
The press release is there, and then the appraisal report, I got permission last night to post it.
Okay.
That'll be posted within a day or two.
That's what it was. That's what I was looking for. I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not there yet, Trudy. I'll get the link done.
Thanks.
And then eventually the fatal flaw would be there too. So that's sort of the storage site for the documents related to the
I'm
project.
going to share this link with the budget committee so that you have easy access to this page,
I
which
like that, thank you.
which has, I'm going to take you directly to the important information page. It has the purchase and sales agreement, the press release, and I'm assuming that's where you're going to add the other link you're referring to as well.
What's the header for that? It says land?
Important information.
No,
Land purchase.
Land purchase. So, because underneath that is feasibility study and some other documents. So under land purchase, there'll be links to everything related to the land.
Got it. I just shared that link with everybody. All right, anything else on Article 2?
I do have a question. I may have misheard it. I thought that there was a discussion that if it fails this year, that there would still be one more election. Just as first and foremost, am I wrong in that?
No, you are correct. In the purchase and sales,
Maybe it was just the way I was skimming, but
yep.
it's in here?
There's a provision in there that the purchase and sales stays in effect through, I'm doing my dates,
Everything I'm
2024.
looking at talks about June 2023. Let me go back to. Yeah, honor shall be held on or before July 14th, 2023.
What shall be
There's
held?
something about
It says that the
extending
closing,
The closing.
time for performance, delivery of deed, closing in which the seller shall deliver the deed, the closing shall be held on or before July 14th, 2023.
If it successfully passes the first year, there's another provision that says it can be extended for another year. So it is through 24.
Okay,
I can find it for you, but
that's fine. So I'll go to my question about Article 2. I just want to make sure that my assumption or what I heard was correct. If that is the case, why is that information not included in the warrant article? So in other words, if there's a provision that says, if it fails, it will be brought to vote again, or can be brought to vote again, why would that not be disclosed in the warrant article?
It's a good question, but the attorney drafted that language.
But that's like any warrant article. If it fails, you can always bring it back the next year.
But this is specifically tied, it's written into the purchase and sale agreement.
It's under.
So, I mean, if you're, if they're taking a look, what triggered it is, you know what?
25.
If the naming rights is something that we need to have a conversation and get legal counsel to consider, because that's a critical piece of the warrant article, then I would also say that if that is in the purchase and sale, that should be disclosed to the voters as well.
Well, it is being disclosed, I just said it, and it will be part of the, the warrant article is the legal language that enables the purchase, right? There's always supporting details that go along with it, and we'll make it clear, there is a provision, if it doesn't pass this year, it can be brought back the next year. So we'll certainly let everybody know that. It's not anything that won't be disclosed to voters, so.
Mr. Taylor, Ms. Stevens found that it's under section 25
Oh, okay.
approvals.
Can you read the exact clause? It'd be helpful.
All of the buyer's obligations under this agreement, including its obligation to purchase the property, are expressly made contingent upon and subject to the buyer obtaining the following. A, authorization to enter this purchase by vote of Litchfield School Board on or before September 21st, 2022, and final authorization to purchase from the 2023 annual Litchfield School District meeting and from all boards, commissions, and governing legislative bodies required by New Hampshire law on or before April 28th, 2023, without limiting the generality of the foregoing, that the voters at the annual meeting of the Litchfield School District approve a warrant article authorizing the purchase of the property. In the event that the annual meeting fails to raise and appropriate the entire amount, all dates herein shall be extended by 12 months. In the event that all contingencies, including but not limited to approval and funding by the annual meeting, are not met within that 12-month extension period, this agreement shall be considered null and void.
Perfect. We'll make sure people know of that.
All right, anything else on Article 2 tonight? All right, Article 3.
Yep, Article 3. So Article 3 right now is to put money into the Capital Improvement Expendable Trust Fund. The dollar amount that is in there, the board has not settled on that dollar amount. You'll notice that it's written the way it has been written in the past, that it will come from unassigned fund balance. Given the financial picture that we're in at the current time, we don't know that there will be that amount of money left in the unassigned fund balance in June. And we did write the clause that is consistent with the capital plan adopted by the town in September of 2020, because I don't think the new one has been fully adopted yet. I think it's still waiting for final approval. But the intent of the board is to begin to replenish something into that fund, and we just have to nail down the exact amount.
So my question would be this, if the intent of this is to help with a new building, and since we're putting land on it, if the land were to pass, I presume we would start designing something that would go on said land. Is $125,000 an appropriate figure for the expectation of what you would spend for the development of an RFP, for plans, site survey, and all those associated costs? Is $125,000 the correct number? Because based on what I've seen this past year, I'm gonna go no.
So we have already, with Barker Associates, begun some of that work, right? So site planning hadn't begun because the site hadn't been selected. But the building conceptual diagrams have been begun. And what Kyle, the architect, has said is that taking the plans that we have and putting them onto that piece of property, everything was oriented in a very similar manner. Obviously, the particulars of exactly how to access it would need to be ironed out, but some of that work has already been done. And I'm not sure, to your point, we'll have to double check with Kyle on what the exact amount would need to be for that.
So my recommendation would be that it's a real number. Don't put in a placeholder that we've been putting in for the past forever. get a real number that actually reflects what the cost would be for the project. That way we don't find ourselves in a situation where we've overexpended architectural fees because we just used a random number we've been using forever. Get the real number. Put it in.
What's currently left in that account?
125,000 and 0198 capital improvements.
Today?
That's the balance.
Yep,
They replenished
Oh,
at the
that's
end of their
right,
funds,
because
I think.
that's right.
Yeah, so this would put 250 in there, and we do have a number from Kyle, we already have that projected number.
I was gonna say,
So-
just use the real number.
Well, except the amount to go in, if there's already 125 in there,
Well, then maybe it's 50,000. Just get a real number.
correct, thank you for the point.
And so, in the spirit of that, would the language change then, right? Would it be focused more on, would you remove renovation of existing facilities?
So when the fund got created in 2020, that's the language of the creating.
Right.
Enabling warrant, so that just replicates what it was done for. I'm not sure what, maybe somebody knows, how do you modify
I
an
think you have
intent?
to, actually, you probably remove one and reinstate another. Like you probably close this one and open a new one
I
with a
think you're
different
right.
purpose.
I'd be
At least
very-
that'd be the cleanest way of doing it.
I'd be very concerned about changing the language to it, because then at that point it starts getting into, okay,
Yeah.
well, you use the language in
No,
order
you're
to
right.
take care of a situation, and now you want to change the language for a different purpose. The language is the language. If you want to create a new fund that is specifically building
It's a
GMS,
separate
by
one.
all means, go ahead and create that and fund that. But changing the language after it's already been used for different purposes, that would be troubling to me.
Anything else on Article 3 tonight? All right, Article 4.
So Article 4 is also what we have been doing for a number of years, and that's placing money into our Building Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund. That one predates the other fund by quite a bit, 2005, and that was for funding school capital improvements, building maintenance, and repair. You know, this is the fund that we use in the event of the rainy day, so, you know, we learned recently that the 20-year-old boiler at Campbell has cracked, and so we're getting a section taken out and a new section put in. And I look at that and I say, okay, so you've got, I don't know, 10 or 15 sections per boiler, 2 boilers, one has cracked, it's 20 years old. This is the kind of thing that we're gonna have to, again, continue to struggle with. And I know, you know, people talk often, it's the new school, but the new school is 22 years old, so stuff does go wrong. This is to put money aside for those kinds of
And what is the current
situations.
balance of that fund?
105,000 and change.
And did the district utilize any of those funds for the CHS field pumps?
no, not as of now, it just came out of the operating budget.
And do we have any idea as to how much that boiler repair might be?
About 9,500.
One section.
That's why the fund's so big, because boilers aren't cheap.
Other questions for Article 4? All right, Article 5.
So,
Actually, I'm sorry,
Yep,
if I could
no.
just go back one other question. So, Dr. Chetty, you had mentioned, you know, obviously you don't know what the remaining balance is going to be at the end of the year. Do you or the school board have an idea in terms of if there is, let's say, only 125,000, how you might, if there's less than 250, how would you plan on divvying that up? Which one would you
so
prioritize?
the way the RSA is written is it's
Sequence of order.
So, basically, Article 4, in the current structure, 3 comes before 4, so then it would go into the 3 first.
Okay.
The board may say, you know what, we prioritize 4, so switch them.
Okay.
You know, so that still hasn't been determined, but it is sequence-based.
Okay,
So I
then
can-
I would want to recommend to the school board that, you know, based on that particular balance, and now at this point, there's already been 1, potentially 2 items that may end up getting dinged against that account, that rainy day fund may be better suited than a potential building fund.
I questioned the
Take
order
that
last
number
night
three.
too. Yeah.
Your suggestion would be to flip the order?
Yes, that 4 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4.
So a little bit more information on that. I confirmed that, looked to confirm that with the attorney today. He said that's how DRA has always kind of thought of it. But he said there is ways to write it in there where you can use percents as well. So you can say, 33% up to 125, and then the next 33% could go the next one, or 40% and 60%. And then you use maximums at that point as well.
Interesting.
So to kind of divvy it up. So that's a possibility too,
You got that at 4 o'clock, right?
right around there, yeah.
So we'll take it to the board at the next
Good
meeting.
information.
Are there any other questions on 3 or 4 before we leave those? All right, Article 5.
Yeah, so Article 5 is the one that we've been talking about, and I asked our attorney to come up with language, assuming that they had developed this for other districts. But this is to establish the Employee Benefits Capital Reserve Fund. And I want you to notice the language, because it actually was more encompassing than what I had asked for originally, and I liked where it came out. It's for the purpose of funding the payment of negotiated employee benefits, including but not limited to health insurance reimbursements, changes in coverage or policies chosen by the employees. So when they elect a different plan, they go from a 2-person to a family, then there'll be a cushion set aside. Severance benefits, so that's the retirement amount that I know has frustrated some members because we budget and budget and budget. We'll be able to park it here. And also other benefits that are from time to time negotiated and become contractual obligations of the district. So it'll allow us to build up that cushion. And then I still think we have an obligation to budget what comes in, but we're not, if we think, okay, somebody's just asking as a placeholder, they're really not going to retire, we have no choice but to budget for that, but we don't know. We just don't know. Now we'll have a cushion. We can be tighter with the number that we put in the budget. And notice we did 2 things this year. We've got that severance number of $205,000, I think, and then the $50,000 adjusting the insurance coverage, right? So those were the 2 things that we can now utilize this fund and not carry as a budget item going forward. And again, it is coming from fund balance, which is, right now, that's the way it's worded, but.
So my recommendation, well, the reality is, at least 2 of these severance packages are already in the current year budget. So to me, that should be clearly an underspend. So I think this one should be parked first, because that money should go directly to this. If we have 2 employees who indicate they're gonna, or 3 or 12 or whatever it is, they indicate they're gonna retire, they're not retiring. We're not spending that money. That should be the first thing we fund, because the expense for that situation is going to hit. We've already paid it. That's taxed for it. This, in my opinion, should be the first one funded, because that's what the taxes were raised for in the first place. It's not like we got a savings on a boiler or we got a savings on books. This is a person who said they're retiring, for whatever reason decided they want to hold off a year or 2 or 3. We know it's coming. It's just not being hit this year. So if we already have the funds for it, to me, this should be end of year balance, and it should be the first one funded, because we shouldn't be spending it because they're not retiring. That's my opinion.
And what happens if they do retire?
Well, they're in this year's budget. We're not paying it out this year.
Right, but then you would end up funding this fund.
So at the end of the year,
If this is before,
and I will help you sell this one. If this one passes, if they didn't retire this year, that money should get put into this July 1st, because they didn't retire this year. They're gonna maybe retire next year. Well, now you can move those funds from this year's budget.
I understand what you're saying.
And put them in here.
But what if they do retire?
Do you retire this year?
It's in the budget.
Well, then,
But
Then you're gonna end
the
up
problem is you put it at the top of the list. Let's say $100,000 is set aside for person X to retire. That person does retire. Now you all of a sudden put that number on there.
Right.
Guess what? This one gets funded first at $100,000, and then the other 2 don't.
That's the only,
no. If they retire this year, you already have the money in the budget. You
Right,
pay
but
it
if you
out of
have
the
a
budget.
warrant article that you have
Put
to then
money
at that point raise and appropriate X number of dollars, that first 100,000 has to go here. And then you're actually double paying. So now I put it in the budget, and now at this point I gotta go throw another 100,000 into this particular fund.
The number of times I've been double and triple taxed for retirement, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I can see doing that, like, let's say this passes. is the intent, let's say, the following year, you have two people who plan to retire, then they say they're not going to, that those monies, because you have to budget for it, that then you would then roll that money into this fund.
So I think what we have to do is roll it up to a balance that we're comfortable with maintaining there. But you may look at it, and again, it becomes, it's sort of a guessing game, Brian. You know, is Doug really gonna retire? And, you know, I think people are putting in for it because they're protecting that right.
No, I understand budgeting for
But you
it.
can't every year, because we've historically been over budgeting, and if every year that over budget just gets dumped, the next thing you know, you have $1 million sitting there, and that's not right either. So I think we have to figure out, in asking, in budgeting, and using this fund, what's the right number to, you know, protect.
So I think what you do is you figure out how many didn't retire this year. Use that as your base number. If it's $75,000 that we budgeted this year but didn't get spent, but might get spent next year, put that away. 75 grand, or 2.5, whoever those people are, and whatever their benefits are that we did not pay out in this year's budget, use that as your initial number, plus whatever you want to, we can talk about for the other stuff. But unless we're going to return the money that we taxed this year and then tax it in this one, we're still double taxing. It doesn't solve the problem this year. And this is a year where you need to try to, it would be beneficial to try to pull out what we can that we don't need in the budget to minimize and improve likelihood of other passages. So we already know that we have people who put in the current year's budget that will not hit until next year's budget. So that money should be set aside and removed from the proposed budget. That is my opinion. I don't know how you make it work. That's how I want it to happen.
Dr. Chetty, historically, I mean, obviously, there can always be outliers. Would you say that by the time we hit early March, you usually identify those people that have cold feet and change their mind and defer to a later date?
So we typically, the typical cycle is this. They have to notify us by December 1st, November 1st.
I think it's November
1st.
15th. Yeah.
We then issue contracts and renominate in February,
Okay.
early March. They have until the end of April to get contracts back.
okay.
But that's the window where people are like, yeah, I'm not gonna do this. And so, unfortunately, it can wait that long. But we've had circumstances where people have signed the contract and then come back to us and said, I have a change of heart on it. So the old days of teacher contracts, there were real firm deadlines and you knew what was going on. That's not the current climate.
So it's not like you can have a little bit more confidence or knowledge by the time it hits deliberative, but there's still too much time where they still have the chance to either execute or not execute the contract.
Correct.
Okay.
And those are all in the RSAs. That's not, you know, the law talks about the April deadlines for teacher contracts. So, I mean, we're bound to those.
Sure. Okay.
Other questions around Article 5? All right.
And that's what we have at this time. There were not, Tara, I'm looking at you to make sure, but I don't think there were any
that was it.
additional warrant article suggestions.
Nope.
If you look at the last several years of school warrants, they've been relatively short. Our strategy and goal has been to present a tight warrant for the voters, and that's what we're proposing to do again.
So we will look forward to seeing those numbers in very early January. And then on January 5th, we'll have an opportunity. Again, that's the night we're voting, but we'll still have an opportunity to ask additional questions as we take our motions to either recommend or not recommend these articles as a budget committee. Okay. Anything else, school warrant articles, before we switch to the town?
Not for warrant articles.
All right.
And then you want us to stay on for,
Yes, because I'm going to have questions about the LMS project. Unless you want to just cut to the chase and just go now real quick. Like we talked last week. I mean, it's up to you guys.
Are you referring to our
Well, we talked last week
questions?
about getting a handle on some of our numbers, and I said, I'm gonna ask you again next week, and you said, go ahead.
Yeah.
About getting our hands around consultants.
Oh, yeah. All right. Are you all okay if we take 5-7 minutes? That way, then you all can be done for the night?
So do we have our handle on what our consultants are going to be hitting the
Yeah,
current year
so,
budget
so
for?
last night in non-public session, we had a dialogue with the board where we were predicting and projecting where we believe we're gonna land. Part of the reason why that was a non-public discussion is it does involve some personnel decisions that we're not ready for prime time yet, so we wanted to make sure the board heard those and had an opportunity to think about them. And I believe our intent is at the January 4th meeting, they had some questions for us, so tighten it up, and then it'll be a formal presentation, so. But
Yeah, so
Doug's
to
got
give
some
a
handle
couple
on those
numbers
numbers.
on there. So it's Windy Hill, which is the architecture firm, that, they came up with the plans, but has to be revisions as you go through, and they're on to make sure the plans also go well. So they are expecting between July and then the end of the kitchen work, that they would be roughly around 28,100 for
So if
that.
it's the July one, would that come into the proposed budget, or would we be wrapping that into the current budget?
We would be going to the school board and the budget committee with
An addition?
an addition.
Okay.
Yep. So the other one that is still, that we have a contract with, which is the commissioning agent, start with a contract of around 30,000. I don't know at this point how much is gonna be left at the end of it, but I would assume it would be less than 10,000, so we try to get that. The unknown, which I haven't gotten the data for yet, they're now at a point where they said they can get me the information, is North Branch, which is doing the construction work. So there is still a gap between how much the municipal lease is and then how much the project's gonna cost in its total. And they're gonna do a month-by-month expectation of what the cost will be. I don't have that information yet. A little while ago when I asked them for it, they said, it's just too early. And then, when I asked again, they said, we're at a point where we can provide that.
They have a
So-
log. They can tell you. They have a log.
So, I've been emailing them, I'm gonna email them again saying, about the importance of us getting that information by January 4th. So we would bump up, we would ask for things to be bumped up by those amounts. Knowing that we do have at least one revenue source coming in for next year, and that is around 64,000, which will come from Eversource. And so you have an opportunity to get $64,000 twice. You get it in when you first say, hey, we've done these modifications to the building. It's going to, result in, less energy. And so you get 64,000 from kind of proving that work has been done. And then a year later, you get another 64,000 if you can actually show that you met those energy goals. So that 64,000, as far as we have a contract for it, so that will be coming in. So that will be obviously be able to help against these costs. And then what we're also waiting for, which I think a lot of schools are waiting for, is the Inflation Reduction Act that got passed by the government this summer. It does have things as far as energy and renovations. So what that will look like is more, unfortunate, a February. I think the IRS has until sometime in February
Or March.
or March
Yeah.
to make it clear what that will be and how you qualify for that. So we won't have that information, obviously, in January. But yeah, there are costs that will continue to occur next year. And again, next year, they're finishing up the kitchen. So they're gonna demobilize around February 15th. At that time, there'll be, our whole building will be back to us. The boiler room will be all different, and then they're gonna come back June 28th and start working on the kitchen at that point.
2 follow-up questions on that. As far as the 64,000, was that at all either the first payment or second payment baked into the proposal around the rebates that you would receive as far as the project is concerned?
As far as the original,
Yes.
I think,
This is like rebates, buybacks, things of that nature that were part of the proposal.
I have to go back and look at the documentation of that.
Okay.
Scott,
Because my concern would be, if it was, and then we turn around and say, oh, wait, no, we're getting 64,000, well, hold on, now you're double counting it. So,
Yeah.
as long as it's not
we
part
always,
of the original rebates.
we always knew it was coming, but I don't know where, I have to go back to the balance sheets and see where it was laid out.
Okay. And then my follow-up question on that as well is, as far as the rebates, buybacks, things of that nature, do you still feel that you will get that full revenue from that, even though the project has been delayed? So in other words, like if we were expecting 64,000, just to use a round number, and then all of a sudden, we're getting 64,000, but we got 64,000 that we lost out on because we lost time where the energy wasn't being created because of the delay of the project, then we're at a net zero.
No, a little bit different. This is just a rebate from Eversource. Doesn't have to do anything with how much energy we use or don't use.
Yep.
And so about a month ago, we confirmed with them that they know that we're gonna extend, the completion. And they agreed to that and we signed that. So that 64,000 is pretty cemented at this time. It's just, we would have gotten that 64,000, if the project finished in, say, June, we probably would have got it sooner. Now we're getting it later.
Okay, let me rephrase my question then. So the solar panels, originally it was expected that, it would be able to bang this out over the summer. Come September, maybe October, energy was being created by this project.
Yep.
We are now in December. Energy has not been created since, let's just say, September through the end of the year.
So-
Was there revenue, rebates, some sort of quote-unquote income that was expected for those months that we can never get back because we lost the time?
So, not really. The solar, so the rebates coming from Eversource are putting in the high-efficient air source heat pumps. Whether they're powered by Eversource or by solar, it doesn't matter. It's
And the
that-
building envelope.
And that's right. The other part of it was securing a tighter building envelope so it's more energy efficient. So it's energy efficient and using the highly efficient heat pumps. That's what the rebate's for. Right now, we are buying the electricity from Eversource because the solar's not on, but the rebates aren't tied to that.
Okay, but I guess that my point is, though, is that if we were, let's just say we knew that you could do the 64 and 64 from Eversource for all these other things we were doing, but then we were also, as part of the project, assuming that there was going to be some sort of cash rebate, something that was coming from the project from September till December. So sure, you're getting 64 in, but if I was expecting that I was going to get 64 at some point, but then I was also going to get 30 because I'm selling back power, and that 30 is now gone because we missed that window,
Yes.
then realistically, you only got 34.
And the goal that we're trying to achieve is net zero. So, we're gonna produce, when the solar's done, you're gonna produce more electricity in the summer than you use. That's where you're selling it back. But then in the winter, it's gonna go the other way. We will be drawing from Eversource, but on an annual basis, it will be net zero, which I'm not sure the exact definition, but, it's plus or minus $20,000 worth of electricity. So you're either, you are purchasing a little bit of electricity on the whole, on an annual basis, is my understanding of the way it's worded. But none of that has been impacted by, the rebate portion has not been impacted by the timing of the project.
So we'll get solar before we get the battery, the capacity to store that. And then we start paying for the PPA in July. So that's when our payments, which equal about 97,000 minus 2,500 for letting them use our roof for the solar type of thing. Before that, we are paying for, right now, we're paying for electricity. The oil is still going, a lot more limited, and they filled up in June, and we haven't had to, kind of put any more oil in. But to your point, would we have saved some money if the solar was up and running? Yeah, that has to do with not so much the solar, but the batteries, has to do with supply as well. And just kind of where construction and where solar is. So how much money that is, I don't know. you know, that's a little bit hard to calculate until the solar comes in.
All right, I want to quickly hit the outstanding questions we have from last week, so we can kind of wrap up the school side and then switch over to the town side. So when there were 5 other questions from last week, and we hit one of them with the consultants. There was a question around expenses broken out over a 5-year window for curriculum with multi-year commitments. What's the plan, annualized expectation? What's next? ELA math is most expensive. iReady costs next year. Is there an opportunity to lock in multi-year rates to level out? Looks like Mary responded and said, many programs are working towards using resources in lieu of program, which is why there are fewer requests from science and social studies. The iReady quote for the 23-24 school year is $41,525, which includes the benchmarking and individual student pathways, which Mr. Taunton explained last week. There's a significant cost savings to multi-year licenses, but the contracts must be paid up front. There was also a link to a chart that she included, because I think that was one of the things that Ms. Douglas had asked about, was what is kind of the plan moving forward. So if you open that chart, you can see that there is a plan for math and ELA, and as you scroll down, social studies and science, basically from now until 2026.
I guess, so can we just like add up each column to get the annualized year, or is it broken out, or just, when I'm asking for annualized, I'm looking for like 2021, you know, what are we spending each year for under curriculum or expected to pay? I mean, I can add up each column and then carry forward, but is that accurate? Is that how this is intended to be read? I just want to before I do that, I want to make sure that we're on the same page.
I believe that's the case, and although I will say, if you go down to ELA, and if you look in column E, which is the 22-23 school year, and Doug and I had a quick conversation before we came here, because there's a couple of numbers underneath. It says cost and pay date, and there's a $5,000, and then there's an 8402.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm unclear on exactly how that was done. So let me ask that question of Mary, and if
And there are no costs in there for the next 2 years, so are there no costs? I mean, that's why I do have a question about this too.
So I would like to be able to, at the bottom, I mean, I think it's awesome to list each one and put the price, but at the bottom, I'd like to see, this is what we're spending each year for curriculum.
Or
Total.
I think an easy way to do it on the spreadsheet, maybe, I mean, if it makes sense for Mary, is, you know, like, hey, using that one as an example for ELA, right? So the cost for next year is the 76,000, and then in the 24-25 column, it's 15,000 to renew it, and then it's, or maybe, you know, she says it's going to be 15 to 20K annual renewal, right?
Right.
So in 24-25, the high end it's 20K. 25-26, the high end is 20K, right?
Right.
And then you could go down and total that 24-25 column and see we anticipate the cost based on ELA, math,
Right.
science, social studies to be X.
Yeah, ultimately, like, are we going to see big spikes? Is it going to be level?
And some of these things you don't know, like some of them aren't planned out yet. I get that. Like there's really nothing under science, but maybe the things that are known, could we plug
so
some
I'm putting that in
costs?
as a question.
Could we plug some estimated cost in there?
I just added a row 32, total annualized costs. I think we do exactly what you asked, because she does have the note there, so it's really, and, you know.
I just don't want to mess with her. I mean, I can download it and do it myself, but I just don't want to mess with
Yeah.
her.
Let her adjust it, because I think it's actually helpful info for everybody, so.
I think she also needs to clarify, I mean, for fiscal year 25 and then 26, there's no dollar amounts.
Right.
It's not clear to me if we're going to be
Yep.
spending. I mean, I see
I would
the,
expect
I see
that,
the
yeah.
color coding, but I think her note
there
was
is,
that
like, if
a
you-
lot of it's front-loaded.
Yeah, so like
So-
there's $9,400 paid. Oh, that's for a 6-year contract. Never mind. Yeah, so I think that would be helpful.
So we'll get that clarifying added.
So I appreciate the start.
Question 2 was curriculum, instruction, staff training, course reimbursement. What is the current projected spend? At present, we have $44,331.15 encumbered in this account. Based on a rough comparison to encumbrances from this time during the 21-22 school year, we are on track to expend the entire allocation. Question 3, how many transitional students do we have at age 21? I think, Mr. Taylor, this was your question. If you're asking how many students are 21 and are 21 and turning 22 for the 22-23 school year, I cannot answer that as the number would identify exactly who the students are. If you're asking how many students are currently utilizing a transition program, I would say the number that would be provided is such that the students could be easily identified. If you're asking how many students in the school year 23-24 will be utilizing transition services from ages 16 to 22, the answer would be 6.
I think one of the questions was we're trying to get our hands around what's the added expense as a result of the new law. Like,
That was the spirit of the question, right?
That actually wasn't my question.
Oh, somebody, well, I don't remember who.
maybe
asked
it was mine, I don't know, or somebody else's, but
The law added an extra year to it. Like,
So-
what was the associated cost with that? And I understand the rationale of,
I don't know any of the kids, so it's not going to identify it to me. I just want to know how much did our wonderful state push down on us this year, or in the
So-
proposed budget?
Technically, if I have it right, it was 0 because they will, the state always has a little angle, right? So, but they have provided 1-year funding
All right, so going
for
forward.
that. And however, they have stipulated that you have to totally utilize all the grant money that you have, because if you haven't used that, then they're gonna make you use that first, and then
makes
they can
sense.
reimburse. But that's my understanding of where it's landed.
Yeah, and with other things with the state, sometimes you get reimbursed at 100%, and sometimes it could be less than 100%. So they're saying that we're gonna get reimbursed, but I can't guarantee you it's gonna be 100% of what we put in. They might say every school's getting reimbursed at 90% type of thing. And that's, as far as we know, that's just for this year. So going into next year, if we have students that are in that age group, that, we would, as far as we know, would have to cover those expenses.
Question 4 from last week of balance of what is left of the funds available to offset learning recovery. There's a link to a report from the New Hampshire Department of Ed on our ESSER funds. If I'm reading this correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like we were allocated $748,784.06, and of that we have spent $639,835.63.
You're correct.
My rough math would tell us we have $110,000 and change left
You are
in
correct.
that ESSER account grant.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you scroll down further in the document, you'll see that there are 3 approved activities. The first activity was the energy work at the middle school, so 600,900, or I can't even read the number,
297.06.
darn it.
Yep.
Hang on, let me hit my cheater bar here and make it bigger. So anyway, that's the amount that's already come back toward the LMS project. So the balance of that is what was then the 20%, right? Save 20% for learning loss. That is allocated into 2 categories. The first is basically a summer school program for students who have struggled to make sure that they get caught up on credits or learning that has been identified by the teachers. And then the other is the social emotional component, and that is for the social worker that was worked into the grant. So those are the 2 items that appear there, and the social worker was stretched out over 2 years, if I remember correctly.
So is it the expectation that the remaining funds are what are identified as the grants revenue for the positions in the spot? That's what gonna exhaust this
Yeah.
fund?
Yeah, it says intended to be a 3-year contract with year 1 and year 2 being paid 60% from the grant and year 3 being paid 20% from the grant. Full-time status in years 2 and 3 will be offset through IDEA and general fund monies. Okay. Question 5, I think we talked through, that was around the architect design consultant fees for FY24.
Just, JD, can I just zip back? I'm going to give you a link. I'm going to add this link in. So the state's actually created a pretty wonderful website called iGrant. They track the way, so I mean, we had millions and millions of dollars of ESSER funds that came into New Hampshire. And so basically on here, you can see how all of that's been spent by all the different school districts. Litchfield, you can hunt for Litchfield in here and examine what we did. So it's very transparent, very open, and it shows how all of that has been used. So I'm going to add the link in there, because if you really want to take a deeper dive into not just us, but, it was $487 million across the state that is being tracked through here. So I think it's good for the budget committee to have that awareness.
Thank you. All right, question 6.
Well, we did talk a little bit about, we did talk about 5, but I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Clarification, we're waiting to hear back from North Branch regarding their expected per month expenses. So are there gonna be, there's gonna be additional costs above and beyond the GMP for this?
No, well, yes and no. So if I complete that. So there is, once we used our ESSER money and the municipal loan money, as far as the original contract with North Branch, there's still a gap that needs to then rise up to that total cost.
So the lease was based off of North Branch's number, the lease purchase.
The lease-
It ties back to North Branch's proposal way back when. If you look at the numbers, what they proposed and tie it back, it seems like the warrant article was based off of North Branch's numbers. I guess my question is there a change order coming from them for?
So the lease plus ESSER and other funds were tied back to North Branch's number
Yes.
of 6.1
Yes.
million. There have been change orders.
Yes, I saw one that wasn't on the change order log I received last time.
The
A
change
nice
orders-
one. A good sized one.
Well, the changes, they're getting added to the log when we get them, and when they're confirmed, then they get added
Yeah.
to there. So there are change orders, so I mean, as you know, the change orders don't increase they increase the guaranteed maximum, but it's because you're doing more work than what was agreed on at the beginning.
Right.
So some of that work is out of our hands. So we have another change order coming in for fire stop. So they put in the guaranteed maximum. When we go in and we core, we're gonna provide fire stop. Now, when they went in and they raised the ceilings, there was plenty of spots that there was no fire stop before. Now that
That'll kill your budget every time. That's why we needed a contingency fund. Fire stopping, I can tell you, the number of projects, that's usually a good sized change order.
You are correct, having a contingency fund would have been the ideal way to go.
Yes.
So this work is in addition to what was already agreed on. So,
And this comes back to the whole how we're gonna pay for it discussion that you're still working on?
yep, we spent some time with the board last
Okay.
night, and, yep.
All right. Well, I think we should put on the agenda going forward, like construction updates on LMS, so the project doesn't get lost. Regular monthly change order logs. I liked seeing the AIA billing, so if we could get those nice and yes, it's buried in your monthly report, but I think it should be on our agenda to make sure we do our diligence and review it.
Well, I would just disagree, it's not buried in my report, it's usually the
I
first
don't like
thing.
clicking on, you're right, for
So-
your report, it's there, for me, it feels like a scavenger hunt. I like to be able to search in my email, October invoice, boom, pops up. I don't wanna,
But the first link in my report is typically the bill from the month
Yes.
before,
You're
which is
right.
copied, and then the second link has now been the change order link.
yes, I just think we need to put it on ours to make sure we make a note to ourselves to take a look at it,
Duly noted. School facilities would probably be the best place for that.
wherever you like to put it.
All right. Anything else on number 5?
Nope.
Number 6. CHS vocational transport, $58,016. This was a raise by 3%. The note says a 3% increase. I think this was an
You
error.
guys wanted to make sure that we weren't under budgeting for it. So what happened was that the note just got copied and the amount just got copied from the year before. But going back and kind of looking at what we're on track to spend this year, it would be around 52,000. So, if we put a 5% increase buffer in there, some of the money goes to first student, which we know is like a 2.5%, 3%, but it's not all because they can't handle all the routes. So some of it has been going to like Durham services as well. And, they could go up by more than 3% in the year. So we are, as we compare it to this year, again, it fluctuates because it depends on the students. 58,000 would not be an under budget. If anything, it would be an over budget by possibly a couple thousand.
So that's gonna make me wonder if we over budgeted for this year. Awesome, thank you.
Well, this year, the budget was, because it copied over, was 58,000. So if it's around 54,600, I wouldn't call that a huge over budget for this year. If we're projecting, it might be 54. Well, actually, we're projecting it could be 52. So it'll be possibly, but it's hard to get that. You can't get that pinpointed because you don't know how many students.
No, I appreciate that, but sometimes every dollar counts. Thank you.
All right, so that summarizes our questions from last week. Any final questions for school district before we switch to the town?
No, I just think that when we meet again, we should have a discussion about whether or not to carry the $50,000 insurance buffer in the budget, or if that should be set aside for the warrant article. When we come back, I would make a motion to remove that from the budget. There's a proposal for the warrant article. I think it should go there.
We voted on that.
We voted, we had a discussion, and we weren't sure if they were gonna bring it forward. Well, now we know that it's.
Trying to remember where we left that. Did we table it? No, it actually failed 4-5.
We weren't, yeah, my recollection is we weren't sure if there was gonna be a warrant article. Now we know
Right.
there is one. So
Right.
I believe that the appropriate
Yeah.
thing to do would be to fund it that way.
That was a part of our discussion. You talked about there was a
Yep.
potential warrant article,
Yep.
and we did vote on it. Yeah.
So just a heads up, if we don't make the motion tonight, on January 5th, that will be my motion to, or unless somebody wants to jump ahead of me, there will be a motion somewhere to reduce that out of the proposed budget.
Judy, can you clarify, the vote was to remove it and it failed, or
Yeah, sorry,
you just looked at it? so I was-
It was to remove it.
It
and
was to remove it.
Failed 4-5.
It failed 4-5.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So with that, let's transition to the town.
And just so there are some other answers up above. You gotta scroll up in the document. I don't think you need to spend time going
No.
through them, but
I'll
there
digest
was,
them.
there's another one that was highlighted in yellow from like 2 meetings ago that we got an answer to finally, so, so take a look at those. They're there for you. It's all recorded on this document, which is now a grand total of 10 pages or something, so.
Thank you. Yep.
The other thing I just, as I get ready to leave and turn over to the town, I got to reinitiate one of my friendships for the winter today by calling the road agent, Kevin Brown, because we've got impending doom coming. And, I just want to compliment the town, because you got a good guy in Kevin, and, he and I talk, we're able to, figure out where we stand. I'm like, Kevin, you're fully staffed. Just give me a sense of it, because those of you who know me, my preference is to have school, and if we can safely get everybody transported, it's winter in New England, we're gonna try to find a way to do it, and Kevin and I are of like mind on that. He is fully staffed. He said he's got his crews ready to go. He'll be up at 1 o'clock in the morning if necessary to get out there and do what's necessary. So, right now, the rain snow line is west of here, and it's gonna be nothing but umbrella weather tomorrow, and we're gonna have school. But school's already been closed at my house, so, and I
say
joked
that.
with one of my South Central colleagues out in Goffstown, New Boston, that we'll have the umbrella and he can have the shovel and he can keep it too. Because I'm okay with
I can
that.
tell you, my daughter's class was supposed to go on the field trip to Concord tomorrow, and the disappointment when she came home today because that was postponed.
Yeah.
But I know it was the right decision to make because it looks like Concord's going to get a lot more than they're going to get actual snow compared to us. So
No, they're, Concord's looking at 6 to 8.
Right.
So they've already closed.
Still early for us. We all know it can shift.
thank you all.
I'm not going to shift, Brian. Stop it.
We will we'll see you on January 5th for warrant article voting. Thank you. All right, as we transition over to the town, real quick, just a side comment. Mr. Sullivan, I think, is watching our meeting and provided an answer to Mr. Bork's question about the motions and seconds in the minutes. He said he put the motions and seconds and votes in order that they occurred. So let me know if he would like the votes written differently and how we would like it to read. So I can reply to him and have him,
I think it was just the order of them.
yeah,
The order they were made.
the order that
and
they
then you
were
just put the
made.
results next to it.
Right.
That's how we put them in?
Put the motions and seconds and votes in order that they occurred.
So the
For
first one was
50,000.
completed after all the other ones were completed.
Right.
But
He
it's
did the
first vote.
motions and then, and then the result of that first motion,
Oh,
which
I
was
see
the
what you
like
mean. I see
58,
what you mean.
51,800. And then he recorded the results and then it went to the 157 and then it went to the 100,000.
Right, but it wasn't amending, like the next one wasn't amending the motion.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'll respond to him and
Because if we
clarify. That was
voted on a
just,
motion, then that's it, it's done.
Right.
You can make another motion.
No, what I'm saying,
I know you were,
they made the motion, the actual vote didn't occur until after the amendments were done, but the initial vote was that result. So maybe what we have them do is put the final vote
Vote
at the bottom.
Right.
Instead of when the motion was made, when it occurred.
The vote his order can stay the same as long as he moves the votes
To the bottom.
down to the bottom for that original motion.
Vote on original motion, boom.
I'll respond to him here shortly. So, all right.
To a
Good
template.
evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. And so we are going to switch gears to the town side for warrant article presentations. And I will turn it over to you all.
Good evening. So first, if I can just double say and agree with what Dr. Jetty said about Kevin Brown.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right. So we provided a memo on where we were with the current budget.
Yep.
And hopefully all that, there wasn't that many changes. I do have to apologize, and I will agree that the default was a bit challenging. And Karen and I went over it this morning after the webinar yesterday. I actually had to call NHMA and get a clarification on one last item. But in the document that I provided to you, the default budget, the correct number was not in there. Do you have access to the default budget, or?
I have the warrant. I think we have the warrant articles, which actually shows the default the same as
Right.
the proposed.
Yes, that's my error. So the,
Default budget earlier though?
What was that?
I
thought
think
we
I
saw the
have the
default
link
budget earlier.
to it.
Wasn't it in, oh.
the,
Is it 7767778?
you got it, yeah.
Okay, does anybody need the link? I can send it to you if you want.
Is that the same number you gave us the other night?
It is not. So,
After the.
We got that
yeah, after the workshop,
Where's
we
it at,
ended up making some changes,
Okay.
Oh,
ourselves.
All right, I'm just gonna send it to the budget
Remember
committee.
budget-
Yeah, I
please
got
do.
it.
Thank you. I think it's buried.
And so to look at the default, and I think some of the confusion is when you have insurance. So, for instance, when we deal with health trust and we have insurance, and what we surprisingly found out is unless it is a union contract, we cannot move the insurance rate to the default budget.
I'm sorry, so you have
Same
to
look.
carry, no, so you have to carry the same number?
Yeah,
We have to-
except the
yep.
union contract.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
I
Yeah.
knew that, sorry.
Same with any insurance, except for workers' comp, which is a legal obligation, and New Hampshire retirement. It's a legal obligation. So, we feel what we have here is exactly correct. But we're happy to answer any questions on it.
so Article 4. So the proposed budget is $7,713,003, and then the default budget is $7,767,778. Correct. Okay. Questions on Article 4 operating budget? All right. Article 5, Human Services and Health Agencies.
So-
Go ahead, Kate.
No, I'm not, I have to just absorb this. So like the town clerk, that's not considered a,
We had a warrant article to
Article.
hire that
that's the
person.
new
Right.
position, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same
Because
with
it's
Iowa.
not technically a new, like a contract, okay.
Yeah, but it was a
Right.
warrant.
Yeah, I'll just have to dig into this so I better understand it.
And there are notes throughout.
No, I appreciate that, like, this is what I expect, yeah, perfect. I just have to reconcile myself as I spend my 8 hours reviewing it, because I will.
Fair enough.
I do have a question about Article 5. we're state mandated for those donations, at least in some of those cases, correct?
Not
As
that
far as
I'm-
the
No.
Health and
No.
Human Service agencies? I thought that, Mr. Leary, I thought that you had said in the past that if somebody or a group comes to us looking for
That's-
assistance,
It's a
That's
different one.
general assistance.
Yeah, that's general assistance.
okay.
These
It's
are
not this.
donations on behalf of the town. There's actually used to be the welfare fund, but then it became something else,
The
but now
general
it's,
assistance.
yeah, now it's whatever they call it. That's a separate fund.
Okay.
And actually, I think there was a warrant article.
There is a
too.
warrant article for that later on. This is, there's a committee that is the town administrator, the health inspector, and a citizen's representative. We receive requests, from all of these agencies, and then the committee meets and reviews the requests and make recommendations, to the Board of Selectmen. What you'll find is, there were some changes in the requests. So a couple of the agencies had some changes in the number of people in Litchfield that they were dealing with. Meals on Wheels actually requested less. And then there was, Bridges, who actually, requested a little bit more. But the net is a decrease of $655 from last year's funding. And so when we meet and we discuss these requests, we look through the documentation and the reports that they have given us on the number of people that have been served.
Just a quick question. When does the Board of Selectmen vote on these?
28th?
28, yes.
Okay.
You have a meeting on the 28th?
Appreciate your dedication.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You'll get it on the 29th.
Thanks. Anything else for Article 5? Questions? Article 6, fire engine lease purchase.
So I think this is probably the one that is gonna have the most discussion tonight. And it's really too early to have solid numbers on this because there's a number of factors in play. CIP has presented the ARPA funds to the Board of Selectmen. Those have not been approved as of yet, but there's $375, $375,000, sorry, in their recommendation to be used for the fire truck. So this amount that you see here of the 109 takes that into consideration. It's also a 5-year. It's also making the first payment way before the fire truck would be due to us. Right now, we're looking at a 2-year wait. Was 18 months, it's moved to 2 years. The cost of the fire truck has moved as well, and we expect it to move again in March. So it could very well could be that the cost of the new fire truck come March is over $820,000.
So is there any conversation, so there's a couple of concerns that I would have. The 2-year waiting, which could end up being, I think we heard 2.5 years. If this is a critical piece of equipment and we need it right away, should we be looking more towards a used? I could see creating a fund that allows for a purchase, because even if you found the ideal truck that we were able to get, we couldn't get because we don't have the money set aside for it. Would it make more sense, or is it possible to create a fund that would facilitate a fire engine purchase without necessarily tying it to a new or used vehicle? Something that would be a fund that you could use to, if the unicorn appeared and it had the perfect used one that we could end up in our lot in 6 months versus waiting 2.5 years, we still need money available for it. Is there, because when you write, we label this a lease purchase. I believe legally you're tied to lease purchase of whatever you describe. Is there a way to loosen it up a little bit so that it would have the flexibility of used or new?
So I'm gonna agree with the fire department because I did some research as well. I think it would be a unicorn.
I'm not saying-
honestly.
Yeah.
I reached out to a few different chiefs within the state. I think there are used agencies out there that sell used trucks. The chances that they are going to have a truck
Right.
that's going to fit like the water capacity that Litchfield needs, and the different options that Litchfield needs on its truck and is going to be reliable, it's slim. I asked a few chiefs that I know that trade in vehicles quite often, and even their vehicles wouldn't fit our needs. It's pretty specific. If you have a larger city like Manchester or Nashua, their trucks don't carry the water capacity that we would need here. So I think it's difficult. Can it be done? We can always work with legal to see if it can be done. I'm just not sure that that option
Have
would
we
present itself.
evaluated our water capacity requirements based on the expansion of the hydrant system? I know probably when we did this, we need this much, but our hydrants have expanded in reach in town. Do we still need the same capacity? If the hydrant of accessibility has reduced our capacity requirements, could it potentially put some things in more in reach?
I can ask the question, but I think it's also tied to the number of trucks as well. So, if you have a large city like Manchester or Nashua, or even Londonderry with the fleet that they have, if you have problems and run, another truck can come, right? So you have these backup of trucks. Right now, we're slim right now, especially with E4 out and not back. To be able to get another truck there, that would be an issue. I mean, there's no other truck except if you're gonna call in Hudson or Londonderry or, so I think that plays into it, but I'll definitely ask the
Yeah, if you
chief.
could check, I know that if we're in a situation where we need a lot of water, we probably already have help coming on the way. So I don't know if that's the governing, limiting factor.
Do have a comment about Article 6. So if we take a look at going into this budget season, the budget that was brought to us was over the tax cap. At this point, correct me if I'm wrong, we're about $7,000 under the tax cap.
Correct.
You are correct.
As I've mentioned in previous meetings, as the voters continue to keep choosing these items, I don't understand how, if this goes and passes, how you're going to get under the tax cap without draconian cuts. Because now you're tacking on another potential 110, according to this, could be more. When are we going to be responsible and say, you know what? Look, we ended up with a fire station. That added to the budget. We ended up with a communication tower. That added to the budget. Now you want to add a fire truck as well. At some point, you have to wait till one of the other ones expires, like a communication tower, for example, and then say, okay, you know what? That money that we spend is going to the next thing. We can't keep acting like kids in a toy store, run down the aisle and grab every toy possible and hope that at the end, mom is going to go pay for everything that's in the cart. This here is a landmine into next year if it gets passed.
So, Scott-
Because there's no way you're getting under the cap with that expenditure.
And that's what I was gonna bring up, because I was very surprised that there's nothing in here addressing the tax cap for next year. Because even without this fire truck, it's still gonna be problematic, probably even worse than it was this year. And the only thing where you're gonna be cutting from is personnel. I mean, I don't know where else you're gonna be cutting from. I mean, we cut that budget down to basically nothing. There, and unfortunately, you're not addressing the tax cap. And like you said, I mean, God forbid this thing passes, because then,
Right, you lose one police officer this year, guess what? You put this in, now you're gonna lose another one or a handful of firefighters. I mean, it just,
So then maybe
it's
what,
just getting irresponsible.
so is it, I guess the question is it an irresponsible request or is it irresponsible how we're handling? No, like, hear me out though. Is it the lack of addressing the tax cap irresponsible? Because the tax cap, we can say, hey, you know what? We've been at $175,000 for what, 8 years, 6 years, whatever it is. There were concerns back in the day that eventually we would price ourselves out with this. So maybe we need to move to a percentage. In which case, then maybe this isn't as big of an issue. Or are we saying we don't need the fire truck? I guess which is the concern there? Is it the fire truck or lack of addressing the tax cap?
I say lack of addressing the tax cap.
Well, then that is
When
solvable.
we talked about that earlier.
That's solvable. That's all I'm saying. There's a way to address that.
So quickly, I think I heard on Monday you all say that you didn't bring that forward because the full board wasn't there, and that potentially you might be bringing something forward, or did I mishear that?
Talked about it.
Yes, we have talked about it.
So, with the needs of town, and we know that there are not small ticket items anymore, perhaps if the concern is that we're up against a tax cap and having to make big cuts to make it, then perhaps the way to address it is to say, when you come back, let's see a tax cap thing. Like, what would you support? Do you want the cut or do you want the tax? I can't speak for you. I don't know what your position is. I think at this point, maybe it's
Well,
time
I
to
know
revisit the
you,
tax
at
cap.
the selectmen meetings, I'm not totally caught up. Bob can update it more, but I know you suggested a particular benchmark. And you ran some numbers and maybe that's not as favorable as actually what we have currently. I mean,
The
So it is-
cost of living.
It is my opinion, and it is totally up to the board. And certainly I would not put anything here that had not been
It'd be
agreed
a
upon
percentage
by
at
the
some point.
board. But it is my opinion, you are in trouble next year with or without this purchase if you don't address the tax cap.
And that's fine,
And
then,
I
you know
think-
what, then this year you have to put the warrant article for the tax cap.
I agree.
Because you can't put yourself in an issue where what happens if the tax cap doesn't pass, but the fire engine does. Now all of a sudden, you know what, again, it goes back to what I stressed last year. At some point, there needs to be a longer-term plan across either the town or even in the schools of, okay, you know what? We need this list of things, and I realize we have a CIP plan, but you know what? It's not being put into action in terms of a fiscal plan of, okay, when do we have something coming off? How can we then allocate that to the next item that is equivalent? And until we get to that point where we're responsible about putting together a long-term plan and sticking to it, not just some CIP plan that we throw out there and reference when it's convenient to somebody, we're going to keep running into these issues.
Unfortunately, for an SB2 town, you have two options. You have a fixed amount or you have a fixed percent. Other legal entities have other choices. So they can create caps that are dependent upon some economic indicator, right? So it moves. So even with a warrant article for a fixed amount change or a fixed percent, and I would say go with the percent, which at least moves with your budget, it's still difficult because your economic climate changes. And we're unfortunately in a situation where if you look at the CPIU, it's growing. It's gonna be, double, triple almost what it is next year compared to this year. So that's the situation we're in, and the contracts are gonna climb, the prices of utilities, the price of fuel, the price of, and there's gonna be no way. And do you try to go to your taxpayers and say, we're gonna take 175 and make it a 5%? I mean, I think it is a difficult conversation, and the board needs to weigh that out. So I have given them a number of different things to look at, but ultimately, I think they need more discussion.
So it's only a percent or dollar amount? I thought the numbers that you had were based off of that benchmark, so you're saying because we're
can't do
SB2,
that.
we can't use that benchmark? Interesting,
correct.
okay. I didn't hear that.
Is that, Mr. Leary, is that something you all are discussing on the 28th?
I think it's supposed to be brought forward, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a question about just the math. I thought you said that the CIP had $375,000 in the fire?
375,901.
Okay, 375. So, let me go back to this here. So if the total cost of the fire engine is 659,154, is that the total? That's the total cost, correct?
Less the ARPA funds.
Yeah.
Plus interest.
The interest is what's.
So there's interest factored into the total payment, and so it's also the less the ARPA
So it's
funds.
like $175,000 in interest? Because if I subtract the 659,000
Yes.
minus the lease purchase of 453,000,
And what's the percent?
it's like 206,000.
169.
Right, so the 453 here, 453, 251, or
Yeah.
321s,
Mhm.
is based on what we expect the fire engine to cost in March,
In March.
which is 829, 222.
829,222 less the
829,222.
375
Less
ARPA
the
funds.
375,901.
And what's the expected rate, interest rate?
4.98, and they're not holding to that. Again, that is another
Ah, I'm
economic.
not surprised considering
value.
what I just locked some CDs in it, so I'm not surprised that it's that high. And could go higher, which is why I probably shouldn't have locked in, but it is.
What was it? 4 point what?
4.25.
I think I was
4.98.
Locked in for like 2 years. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to think about it for 2 years.
But I do, we've gotten a lot of different information for the board to look at, with or without the ARPA.
Because there's still a chance that they could decide to not fully fund all the other ARPA fund things and funnel more of the money to the fire truck.
Sure.
Right, so I mean, depending on what the board decides they want to do, because the CIP plan isn't as worried about, committee's not as worried about the tax cap, so they have their vision, you guys have the bigger, different picture or perspective, and maybe like, hey, that's great, that's awesome, we agree with you, but unfortunately, this is our number one priority, we're taking more money here. So that's really up to the board to decide how it could be 200, it can be 600, it's all up to.
Could be zero.
It could be zero, but that didn't work out so well last time because I remember who stood forward and said, but ARPA funds.
So this is to replace the 1995
tell you
truck, the
later.
27-year-old truck?
Do you know?
Yes, this is to replace the one that, basically, if we don't, it's only worth $7,262.
But it is to replace that one. So it's gonna be 29 to 30 years old by the time we get this new truck if it passes.
Correct.
All right, so what is wrong with the 95 truck? Is it operational? Does it need a pump?
Yes. So it has high mileage. There's problems with the pump. It would need a pump upgrade. It's estimated about $90,000 in work. 60,000 in one.
All right, does it need any chassis repairs or anything like that? Is everything else in good working order? Sometimes the older engines are better than the newer engines. They will last longer.
Back when they were made with real metal.
Back when they, made a good engine.
Cast iron.
So I know the $60,000 in work, is mostly because there's safety concerns, ABS concerns, and emission concerns. All three.
Emissions concerns?
Yeah, it's not set for new emissions. And then the pump upgrade would be $30,000
All right,
itself.
so if there was a fire today and we needed the 95 truck, is it serviceable? Can it do its job?
It can be serviced. It's running right now only for brush fires.
All right, if we invest $90,000 into it, is that gonna help us, kick the can down the road 10 years if we don't vote for this new truck? Now, what would be the life expectancy of the extension? I know we did that to
The other truck.
one of the trucks. And it's short in money, and to me, it provides a lot of value.
Well, I'm thinking too, they have 375,000 right now that the CIP committee is earmarked for a fire truck. Why not earmark those monies for fire trucks to fix them and bring them up? So that, I'm sure it's more than just a 95 probably needs work, right? So you could probably like take $400,000 and take your fleet and
And upgrade it.
upgrade the
Or,
existing.
If it's gonna require so
And
many
you know
thousand
those
gallons
fit in
of
the
pumping.
base.
Yes, they do.
And examine, is the full fleet that we have today what we really need?
So by fire standards? No, I mean, today's standards for fire service is generally anything between 15 and 20 years is your reserve truck. Anything 20 plus isn't even used.
How can towns
No.
afford new fire
I
trucks
know.
all the time? So, and with the prices going up,
And the
I say
lack of
leave the new ones-
availability.
Leave the new ones alone and start fixing what we have and bring it up to specs.
And this goes back to my previous point. You know what? Then at that point, that should have been considered when we took a look at a fire station. You know what? When you overbuild for a fire station, knowing that the trucks inside the station need to be repaired, there's only a certain amount of pie of money. And if it means that then, you know what? You got to get rid of some of the things when you did the fire station because you need a fleet that's functional that comes in and out of that fire station, then that's what you need to do. This is what I'm talking about. We get too irresponsible and we want everything, the moon and the stars in the building, and now all of a sudden we go, oh, but what about the fire trucks? And then I feel like the taxpayers are held hostage that, well, you know what? We're not going to be able to put out fires. We're not going to be able to do this. We're not going to be able to do that. Well, you know what? It wasn't our fault that you didn't come up with a reasonable cost building that would still leave enough money to be able to take care of the fleet. And I will say the same thing when it comes to a new GMS proposal. That if you go and try to do a $35 to $40 million project, guess what? Operationally, things are going to suffer. Because again, I can't stress enough. People only have so much money to be taxed.
And moving out of town isn't the answer.
Not the answer.
Limited and fixed income people.
So I think there was a very detailed kind of critique that was done on all of the fleet. I'll send that off to you and you can
Yeah, I
read
remember
about more
seeing
about.
one, because they did that for the CIP, I
Yes,
believe.
I think
I've shared that.
Mr. Brown did one
Like 90 new firefighters.
on all of the trucks.
Question, isn't it?
You steal my thunder on that one, Brian? I'm already geared up, ready to go on other.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on,
Sleeping
So
quarters.
it's interesting, I was just trying to, I'm looking at the historical warrant articles inventory and I don't see the fire truck on there.
You don't see this past 2022.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, it's only till 2021. I was
Yeah.
trying to figure
That's only
out
things that
what
pass.
was the total cost of the fire truck then, because what's being proposed, the total actually adds up to over $1 million. 1 million,
It was less than that.
it was less
I
than
thought it was
that,
700 and some odd.
759,
Yeah.
Yeah, last year
769,
was-
somewhere in there, yeah.
it was 759, okay, all right.
Let them increase the prices to whatever they want. Let's fix what we have.
Well, eventually they'll price everybody out and you'll have to, it'll be a deflation.
Have to bring the
Right,
prices down.
yeah.
All right, anything else for
We can
Article
help-
6
we can help.
tonight?
Just as a side note on that, is that, a little while back, we had an opportunity to look at a used fire truck that met all the needs that we had, that we wanted. It was down in Tennessee, I believe it was. But we didn't have funds set aside for doing such a thing, to purchase it. So my thought was, if we're gonna take some ARPA funds and spend them on a fire engine, take that money and park it in an account. So when something like this pops up, we can fly somebody down to wherever it is, have them inspect the vehicle. If it's a go, have them have check in hand, you know? Down payment right here, you know, we'll
You've
get
been
you the
talking
rest
to
within
Carrie.
30 days, and then.
Didn't you bring that?
I think even if you
You
don't do
were
the,
one that mentioned it a while back.
if we don't have a lease purchase, I think there should be something in here, whether it comes from unexpended funds, just start building a fund so
Yeah,
that
but you only have a certain amount of time to spend those
Right.
ARPA funds too,
You
so.
can't park it.
And you
I mean,
can't park
You
it.
can't park it.
But there's
the
nothing
ARPA.
saying we can't use some of our unexpended funds to start creating a fund.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years, we should be paying ourselves a payment so that we build this, so we benefit from the 4, 5, 7% interest. And then one day we'll have a good chunk of money to go buy, whether it's used or new. Drives me nuts to pay interest.
Anything else on Article 6 tonight? I know you said you were gonna send us the detailed list.
I'll
of
send you the detail that, Mr. Brown put together on the trucks, I think working with, the former chief.
Perfect.
And then, once the board comes to a decision on the use of ARPA, we'll nail down these numbers and
Okay.
how they wanna
Thank you.
move forward.
Did the board make a decision on, was it the, using impact fees to pay down the bond?
Yeah, we did that last year.
But there
We
were,
did do it last year. Did you do
Yes.
it this year?
Did we do it this year? I don't
No,
think
we
we did.
discussed it.
We did discuss it, but we didn't do it.
All right, Article 7, Property Revaluation Expendable Trust Fund.
wish we could just not do it. No,
Right. Wish you could.
I know.
I wouldn't advise it.
Current balance is $50,000, and the goal is to establish $100,000 by 2024. Next revaluation is 2025.
Correct, and it's, to come from the unassigned fund balance, so there's no tax impact.
Additional tax impact.
Yeah, no new.
Well, there'll be a
tax-
lot in
No new
2025,
taxation.
don't worry about it.
Comments, questions on Article 7? Article 8, Fire Weekend Coverage.
I do all the talking, Brian, please. I gotta let you vent if you'd
Well,
like
this is
to.
an item the
So-
budget committee took out of the budget,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah.
Fire wanted to come forward, with a warrant article. These are per diem employees, so the only cost is the hourly wage. It would have a tax impact.
my question is, what's the driving force behind the request? Are we currently not responding to weekend calls?
No.
So, I already have an opinion on this,
So, but,
but I'm just curious as to, I'd like to understand why we feel, after all these years, that we need this.
It is more difficult now to have on-call workers and have them respond, especially on the weekends. So it's not that the calls aren't being responded to. Sometimes they'll be responded to by, Hudson or.
Yeah, we contract for weekends, right?
Right, so, but the call volume, if you look at the volume and the increase, which I think we provided. the
You did,
committee.
by day.
Right.
And those weekends
Those
were like the top
Yes.
days for calls.
Right.
so it
And
leads me to the question I had, is we have 2 firefighters that work like 7 to 3, Monday through Friday. Right? So how come they don't work weekends?
Why is that their
I-
schedule? Why don't they have like Tuesday, Wednesday, or something, if those are our lowest volume days?
so, are you speaking of the chief and the paramedic?
Well,
The chief and,
So my understanding is that the current staffing is based on the schools. that originally they put full-time people in there because kids were in schools. So my guess is it's because it follows the school week, Monday through Friday.
Right.
That was when they went from, back in the day, when they went from volunteer to full-time, having people on staff, it was to have people available to address injuries, whatever, at schools.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been told.
But what is
I
the
mean,
difference, of, like, on the weekend, if there's an injury or something?
But that's, back in the day, we had volunteer. I grew up with volunteer. There were no people
Then the other
meeting.
question along with this is, I mean, I don't know where we stand right now as far as a chief, right? Because our chief is part-time, correct?
So right now we have an interim, so, Doug is the interim chief. He is working his full-time hours at this moment.
Right.
Any change would have
But the
to be
previous
made by
chief
the-
was part-time,
He's
right?
part-time.
He was.
28 hours.
So is the intention to hire another part-time chief?
We haven't discussed that yet.
Well, I'm assuming that you
Well,
have to discuss it pretty soon.
what path we want to take.
Right,
There's a
so
couple of paths with
will you be
on.
doing that on the 28th?
Probably not.
Okay, because that would have to go as a warrant article.
It would.
Well, if they move it
If it,
full-time.
yeah, if it moved it beyond part-time.
If they keep it status quo, then
That-
probably not.
Right. That's what I'm asking. I mean, are they going full, looking
You
to go
won't see a
full-time?
warrant article
Then
on
you
that
have more
this year.
flexibility as far as,
That would probably cost you more than $24,000 too, I would imagine.
probably. I'm not saying it would pass, I'm just curious, it's.
Some of us
what the
remember when
thought
the
is.
chief was, you know, a lot less than that.
Well, the other concern that I would have about not having, so even when you had the chief, part-time, you had the deputy chief here Monday through Friday. There's other things that he participates in that are definitely during the week, during the business hours. There's coordinating with state agencies. There's workshops, there's meetings with, the Department of Safety. There's meetings with us, there's payrolls,
Need
things that have
emergency
to be
management.
done.
We had a representative from the fire department there today.
Right, so you need someone that is available Monday through Friday to represent the fire department at these other things, whether it's schools, whether it's town.
But you could adjust a work schedule, like on Tuesdays, I'm working the mornings, and then there's ways to work the schedule to make that work. My question is, the question I have anyway is, how, this is currently covered by on-call, these hours are on-call, there's a person designated for on-call, paid, so we're not getting people to sign up for that? To agree to cover that? Like, is that what?
Well, it is it's more difficult now
But-
with the number of firefighters that are available. And most of them have some other full-time job, right? They're a firefighter somewhere else, so there is difficulty in getting these types of weekend hours covered.
So have we been in a situation where we have no coverage on a weekend?
Not that I know of, but I'll refer it to interim chief.
So I don't know if you know this or not, but what the response time is, like, let's say that we have volunteers, but we also need an additional truck, so from Londonderry, who gets there first?
That's a mean
He
question.
did say,
Huh?
That's a mean question.
yeah, it's not
Mean
always,
question?
it's
No,
not always us.
The answer is Londonderry.
I thought it
Yes.
was
that's what I'm
11.
thinking, right?
Well, because Londonderry's in the building.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you don't have a volunteer, or missing a volunteer, then you're gonna get a response.
So these people covering the weekends, they're not physically at the fire station, they're just on call and you're paying them.
No, they'll be at the
No,
fire
they
station.
will be there.
Right.
So
how
on
many-
this,
On this one, but
Yeah,
not
this one,
but
currently.
not currently.
So
The other ones are stipend.
How many people are we talking about? Two
Two.
people? One each day, 16 hours a day? Are we talking multiple people?
Two
I think it's
people.
I think it was two
Two
people
people.
each day.
Two
Two
8-hour
people.
days.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah,
8-hour
I think it
shifts.
was in the,
Saturday.
they're asking for exactly what was in the budget and pulled out, so I believe that's listed under the fire exactly.
So instead of being on
He
call,
had it a
getting paid, they're
number
gonna
of
get paid anyway.
hours.
Instead of
So-
being on call and getting paid when they get called, they'll just get paid.
They'll just get paid.
Yeah, but then you have the potential to go see your kids play. If you know, well, I have my beeper, but I appreciate the concern. I don't know if this is the year to
It's
bring
not
this
something
forward.
that I would be, supporting without more understanding of it, because to me, we just don't need it.
So it's
I would need to understand the problem we're trying to solve, because I grew,
Having the station manned.
I understand that, but I also grew up in an area where the firefighters came long after the fire was burned out. So to me, so long as my neighbor's house is saved, I'm good. I don't expect them to save my house. So what am I really benefiting from this? Like, I don't have monitored smoke detectors, so that by the time anybody notices my house is on fire, it's gone.
Extra careful with my wood stove, only running it during the day while I'm there.
Exactly. So to me, it's just like, I would need to understand what problem we feel we are trying to solve.
So I'd like to bring up a similar point that I mentioned to Mr. Brown last year, is that when I take a look at Article 8, and I'll jump ahead quickly just as a reference to Article 11, okay? I already stressed the fact that we're 7K under the tax cap right now. If you take a look at the annual, not the, April 1st and beyond, you're basically setting a $50,000 time bomb, which if you take a look at that against a $175,000 increase in the tax cap, so you're telling me that you're gonna go ahead and destroy 30%,
So which one is
Of-
the other one? 11?
I'm sorry?
Article 11?
Yeah, the librarian, assistant librarian.
Oh,
So you
there's
start
two
to-
11s, I'm
So you
sorry.
start taking a
excuse
look
me.
at that,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden,
11A,
I'm like,
11B.
the first 11 isn't gonna be a problem.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying.
so 30%, okay? That doesn't even include the fact that your remaining 70% is already gonna get eroded by contracts, raises, benefits, et cetera. So my point that I made to Mr. Brown last year was, I find it irresponsible that you go ahead and you basically give this ability to the taxpayers to go ahead and set this trap on themselves. And that's where I go back to what I said, is that, the town or the school needs to be the parent and just say, you know what? Look, we're not going to set ourselves up to fail in future years, so we're just not going to put the warrant article on there. Because once you put it on there, if they vote for it, you're stuck with it.
I don't disagree with you on that. I also think part of that is, I think a lot of people look at, are these recommended by the budget committee or the board of selectmen? Fire truck last year was a good example of that, I think, when we, in essence, couldn't vote to support that because of the tax cap. I think that partially contributed to it not passing, because there are some people that do look at, does the Board of Selectmen support this? Does the Budget Committee support this? And takes that into consideration at the polls. And where we currently stand right now, based on kind of your logic that you're using, Mr. Taylor, we'd have a hard time supporting any of these where we are with the tax cap right now
I
from
don't see
a
anything at
vote.
7,700 or below.
Correct, yeah, the library one was the smallest one. So that,
What set this thing in motion was the communication towers at 700,000, and the first year of that being funded by the unassigned fund balance.
Right.
That's what set the whole thing in
150K.
motion.
Well, that
So
way they-
naturally, every year, we're gonna be 160, we're gonna be at the tax cap if we
I don't
don't
think that
spend
was
money
Right,
anymore.
because it was sold that it was a zero impact
Right.
for that year.
If it's a
They don't tell you what the
recurring
impact is gonna
expense,
be
you
afterwards.
can't use unassigned fund balance. If it's not gonna be a recurring expense, then use the fund balance. But anything that's gonna be long-term, 5, 7 years, it
And
has
Mr.
to be
Chair-
presented to the voters, they have to pay in year one.
I think, because I mentioned, I think, one of the first meetings for this budget season, that it's not that we can't vote for it or support it. You can support it if you want, but then if something passes, then you're gonna have to go back to the budget, or we're gonna have to go back to the budget and cut that money.
Right.
Correct.
I mean, if we can support the fire truck, but then we're gonna have to find $400,000 to take out of the budget.
But how do we Oh, okay, so in other words, in order to vote to approve it,
Yeah.
we'd have to go ahead and slash it.
Well, it's not 400, it'd be like with that person.
109.
Whatever.
109, yeah. But
I'm
yes,
just saying.
You're right.
So, I mean, we could support it. It's a matter of,
I think the hard part at that point is you get into the town and the school side of it, it's the 80-20, like now you're talking people
The
in
reality
order
is, I
to
think
make
we-
that happen.
Well, and we already did that, right?
Yeah.
We had to remove a position that reality is we need. It's just, it's sitting vacant for now.
Right.
It's likely gonna have to come back, because we need the spot. We just,
All right, in the interest of time, anything else on Article 8 this evening? All right, Article 9, General Assistance Expendable Trust Fund, which is the one I think we were talking about earlier.
It is the one that you were referring to earlier. So there is some concern that this is going to be an extremely difficult year.
what's the current balance?
So currently the balance is 10,000. We haven't used it. It wasn't funded in the operating budget for this year. But we have had about $2,000 in requests, which we hit the general operating budget for. We had room without going into the trust fund.
So I guess my question would be, why do we feel 20,000 is what's needed? Why do we feel we need to double the amount? I understand you just had requests for 2,000 and the concerns about the tough winter, but is there a basis for that amount or just a gut feeling?
So I think we've seen in the past where, just 2 years in 2020, and we know what was happening in that year. It was 4,700 that we had a request for. I don't think that's anything like what you're going to see with the utility costs, the rent costs, and the problems that some of our residents could have this year. I think the state has geared up and they've been letting people know. They've gotten different agencies prepared. The problem with some of these other agencies, when you try to apply for any type of assistance, is your income has to be so low to qualify. So when your residents come here, they expect that we will assist them. And I think you could possibly see more than 10,000.
So one
And we
question
won't be able to cover it with the operating
Right,
budget.
so is there a limit as to how much a person could request? Is there a time frame? Like you're eligible for 2 months worth of assistance? Is it forever?
Yeah,
Like,
if they're eligible, you have
You have
to
to.
help
have to.
them.
forever and ever?
Yep, even if you overspend your bottom line.
No, I appreciate that, but I just know like some programs are 6 months, 12 months,
Yeah.
3 years.
No, if they need it, you have to help them.
I think the thing that you have is you can ask for repayment and lien the property,
Okay.
If they are.
right? And so we have done that and we've had some paid back. And when you see the money be paid back, it comes in as miscellaneous revenue, so.
But if
like
it's for rent, you're not gonna be able to lien the property. You can only-
no.
So, not that I would necessarily suggest that or anything, but I'm just saying.
And it can be anything. I mean, it can be water, electric,
Right.
funeral. We've had quite a few funeral,
Oil, yeah,
oil, medical.
yeah.
Do we offer counseling to anybody in financial straits to help them? Or do we just give them the money requested?
No, they have to
There's a
apply.
process,
They have
yeah.
to apply and,
Yeah.
bring in all kinds of backup paperwork. for
No,
what
but
they
like,
want.
Everything has to be
I
verified.
can see what you're saying, like, okay, this is where you are. Before, let's have a
You know,
chat as to how,
financial planner,
I think that's a good idea.
You too. But you can't force it on somebody.
Right.
Like maybe have a list of resources.
a volunteer, but if they request it, or you can say we have that available if you'd like to have an audit or a review, something to
Somebody
help them
help
out, which would help
Counsel
us
you
out.
through it. I mean, people do those things on their phones all the time now, right? How to improve my credit score. It's kind of a similar philosophy. How do I help myself?
Just take a look at all the expenses, just like we're doing here in the budget committee.
Mr. Taylor, did you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
do, I have an operational question about this. So let's just say, you got 10,000 in the fund right now, okay? You end up, say over the next 2 weeks, you end up with 50,000 worth of requests. And the budget is pretty much down to zero. And you can't give that 40,000. Is this the only way that you can tap the unassigned fund balance? Or in an emergency, can the Board of Selectmen make a motion and a vote to tap the unassigned fund balance if you were in that type of dire straits?
I'm gonna,
If I'm understanding it right,
Yeah.
you'd have to go to DRA to expend your budget line, correct? Is that what I'm understanding? That we're gonna,
I'm not sure, because
Okay.
I think you're correct. I think if there's some type of legal obligation, can the board vote to move? I'm gonna refrain and I'm gonna find you out an answer, because I know where you're going with that, and I think there is, but I want to verify.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else on Article 9 this evening? Article 10, Fire Vehicle and Equipment Repair Expendable Trust Fund. Raise and appropriate $40,000 to be placed in this expendable trust fund.
So,
Note that I was just gonna say, the current balance is $76,366. Board of Selectmen approved expenditure up to $60,000. They've spent $43,575. Goal is to establish a $75,000 balance.
so I just want to note, the current balance will be 76,000 less the 43. That will be your current balance at the end of the year. We do like to keep it around 75. And this is, so where you've had some repairs done to these vehicles that, have needed it. We've also had 18,000, which has come out of their operating budget, over and above the 43. So, they've tried not to hit the fund for all their needs, take what they can out of the operating budget first. But the 43,575 was an absolute emergency in order to keep this truck on the road. So, we'd like to replace it, and at least keep the fund intact.
That was money well spent on refurbishing the fire truck.
Comments or questions on Article 10?
How does the carryover work in relation to the articles? Do the articles all hit first? I know because the town can carry over a certain percent of their money, right? So from the year end, do the articles all come out first? The $0 ones that are transferred in? And then you have your transfer amount. How and when do you determine how much you
There's enough money to cover all
transfer
these.
over?
I mean, they have a healthy balance, so they can cover, these are the unexpended fund balance, so that money's already.
I know, but I thought I heard the stat a few weeks ago was like you're anticipating only 75,000 in year end.
Yeah, from
But
this
that
year's
would go
budget.
into that account.
That- that'll-
That's
Right.
our budget.
Yeah,
And this
so,
is
Just
the
like the school.
cumulative of all of the years of unexpended funds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't.
Oh, so this could come out of that, the transfer, but, okay, got it.
It goes
Right.
all into the same pot.
Okay, thank you for
there's
clarifying.
2.331 in unassigned at the moment.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Anything else on Article 10?
2.331,
Million.
2,300,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Article 11, Public Works Expendable Trust Fund. So the town vote and raise and appropriate $60,000 to be placed in the Public Works Expendable Trust
So
Fund.
what do we just fix?
You bought a truck.
We bought a truck.
Current balance is $100,895. Board of Selectmen approved expenditure up to 60, and 60 has been spent. So the goal is to get that back up to $100,000.
And I think the importance with this fund is to realize it's not just funding the road agent, and it's also funding sanitation. So if we ever had a year where there was equipment that went at the transfer station, which could be because that equipment is old as well. They are working very closely together to try to share equipment, especially backhoes and things of that nature. But this fund for $100,000 isn't much, considering that it's these two important assets. Highways.
Quick question on this one. I don't see anything here that says that it has to be equipment. Could this fund, Mr. Brown brings up quite often about he can't predict how many snowstorms and how much plowing time,
Yep.
as a means to protect ourselves from a very bad winter,
Yeah,
could you have money in this fund that could be expended because you needed to pay out $40,000 more in overtime this year than you did in a previous year?
yes. So this one is very interesting, and it was actually amended just in 2016, I believe. Salt, anything storm related, contractors, snow plowing. It could be that the rates for waste management go through the roof. So it covers a wide variety of things that, in a certain budget year could go over.
And the reason why I ask is just, we run into the situation as we go through each of these departments of, well, you know what, if you cut it too close, then at that point I'm going to have problems. This seems to be an area that we can solve for that problem and say, you know what, look, it's there. It's no different than if I take a look at the special ed fund in the school. You know what, you're not going to be able to predict when a bad winter is going to hit, just like they can't predict if a special needs student comes into the district. But if there's a balance in there that is healthy enough, that way we don't keep going through this cycle of over budgeting for what if. This is our what if, and we can actually budget to actuals plus reasonable growth based on economic factors.
Great point.
So we could, if we wanted to cut 60,000 or from the operating budget, so that we could support this warrant article? That's the
That's
way
what
that you would make,
That's a good way to look at it, yeah.
Wait, what?
It's a no tax
That's no
impact.
tax.
It's no tax impact.
Oh, okay,
It's not
so
a
it
Yeah.
doesn't apply, that doesn't apply to this.
And that also makes it so that there's no,
It's the other article.
you're now using it instead of, for funding a known need as opposed to an unknown need. Like,
No, it's not a known
No,
need.
it
It's
isn't
then
a
at that
known
point,
need.
what is, okay, so we always go through this same argument all the time with Mr. Brown. Okay, 3-year average.
right.
Okay, but what if
I'm just saying, I don't think
we
it's
end up,
60,000.
what if we end up with, a storm that lasts 3 days straight of everybody sitting there with the plows? Like, okay, why don't we just budget to what we're used to, and then this is here, instead of saying, well, you know what, you really need to boost it up by 20%. No, we don't
I
need to
agree.
boost it by 20%.
No, I agree with that. I just don't like, I'm not a fan of reducing 60,000 out of the budget and be like, oh, well, we have this fund to tap into. Like that,
I think she was just using that as an example.
okay, I was gonna say, yeah, I'm
But
not-
there's no tax impact on this one, so.
It doesn't apply.
well, it would in that you'd
It's still a
reduce
tax.
60,000 somewhere else
It's still
though.
coming from the taxpayers, so,
No new taxation.
yeah, I don't like it.
Anything else on Article 11, Public Works? All right, the next article says Article 11. I think this is supposed to be Article 12.
Yes.
Additional assistant librarian hours. This appears to be, I think, part of what we cut during the budget process, asking for increased weekly hours for assistant librarian 2, with a cost $13,312, effective April 1st, 2023. And further vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $9,920 for the period of April 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023.
How is it such a small increase the second time around? Like, 2023 should be half a year, and 2024 should be a full year, so why
I
is it
think it's
not
9 months.
doubled?
It's April 1st to December 31st.
Yes.
Oh.
Right, so the 13 is the annual, 99 is
Oh, okay.
the first year.
Yeah, no, usually we hire in
Yeah.
July, I thought, so, okay, gotcha.
And so you're correct, the trustees, asked to bring this forward, the board hasn't looked at it.
So,
And this is the item that was in their budget.
question, so, have we talked to legal about, since the library is a pass-through budget, the Board of Selectmen has really no purview over their budget. Have we looked at whether or not they can be a standalone warrant article? Since it's not really the Board of Selectmen's budget, it's their budget. They just cut a check to make them happy, they have no say, no oversight. Does it have to be in the Board of Selectmen's budget, or can it be a standalone warrant article? I don't know if you have a question.
You're talking about their overall budget.
The overall budget, standalone warrant article, get it out of the Board of Selectmen's budget, there, 200,000 right there on your tax cap, 300,000.
300,000.
So not
It's a pass-through budget, they have
not submitted with the,
article number 13.
It's not a part of the general operating. It's its own.
yeah.
It's its own entity.
Its own
Its
entity.
own group. So why do they have to be in the Board of Selectmen's budget? Because they've
I
already,
wonder how the default would work in
well,
that
because the
case.
library has told the Board of Selectmen, you can't change our budget, you have no say. So if the Board of Selectmen has no say, then why do they have to be in the Board of Selectmen's budget? Let them be themselves. Be their own warrant article. Is that possible?
So I'm gonna look to legal, but I'm also gonna look up the RSA, because libraries are handled very differently. And although the town doesn't really have say, because the trustees have say over the operations and the finances, the way the RSA language is written, it more or less puts the library as a part of the town in the sense the town has to pay them and has to include them in their budget. There is very special language about this, so let me get the language, let me double check with legal.
I would just like to see, is it an option? Because
Yeah. It's
Moving it
a
out.
very strange, and it's come up at, I don't know how many
it's a
municipal
unique, it's an
things.
interesting way of handling it.
we
It's not
go
one I'm
to.
familiar with, so I don't know all the nuances, but I would just be curious, like, if we could make them their own warrant article, that'd be awesome.
There would have to be a process by which they had a default budget too, because you
Right.
couldn't have a warrant article that failed.
Well,
but
I
then
think if it fails, that
closed
tells
the library.
you a lot more than you think it tells you.
I would also think you'd have to extract, let's say the library budget's $300,000, you'd have to take $300,000 from the town budget and place it there, so the town's not gonna gain anything by taking the library out of there.
Why not? It's 300,000 revenue, that's freed up under the tax cap.
Right, but then
But you'd
that's gonna
have
go
to
to the
vote.
library, so theirs should go down by 300,000.
Correct.
And then your tax cap would be at that base. So you're not really solving anything.
Right.
Well, I'm solving a problem.
Questions about Article 12, assistant librarian hours?
We hashed that one a little bit.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion.
I think we have. All right, if nothing new, Article 13, street discontinuance.
So this has,
budget
no
impact.
monetary, no budget impact, no tax impact.
There's nobody, then that's not one we would vote on.
Which street is
Correct.
being discontinued?
Yours.
So it's,
Hey, I'm happy with
It's
it
a
not
class-
being
House
street.
burnt down earlier, so
it's
no need for the road.
tax parcel, 2018, And it's a class 6
It's up by
road.
Mel's.
Down by Mel's.
Yeah, it's down by Mel's.
I think it's part of the old trolley track that used to run through town.
Yeah, no one's using
And
it.
it's considered a class 5 road, I think, or 6.
Class 6.
6 road, yeah.
And since it's no longer used, the owner of the property would like to have it discontinued.
Oh, they want to give up, they want their, the right of way.
Yep.
Canceled.
All right, Article 14, Veterans Tax Credit. CDRA notice, which I know Ms. Kleiner shared with us in the email yesterday.
So this has already been approved by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. Basically what it does is it makes the tax credit available to those that are active. This is kind of housekeeping. You need to readopt it in order to keep it at the $750, which your taxpayers elected last warrant. Otherwise, if you don't readopt it, it will fall back to $50.
So my question is, is there no way to get a number of how many people in town or an estimate? Like, is it in any paperwork that we already collect?
Active? Not that I know of.
I don't know. I don't.
think
Ones
I
that
don't-
There
I-
is, I don't think,
I don't
Ones that
know.
aren't
I'm wondering,
receiving
like,
it?
we know how many
Yeah.
veterans are in town.
Yeah.
How many are serving.
it wouldn't be on your car. Yeah.
No,
Renewal.
wouldn't be on your car.
I mean, it could be on your license, but that's state.
Ah.
Not everybody puts it on their license, but
Right.
Well, could you get a list from the state of people who live in Litchfield? I mean,
I
who
think
have
it's a
licenses
Department
in
of
Litchfield?
Defense item, not
I
a
just think
state.
that it-
Sure.
I mean, as laudable as it is, if we're, tripling the number of people, like,
Yeah.
I
And
think
it's also,
I don't think it is.
so there's a lot of information about this that's still being worked out through the DRA. They have to come in, they have to show like their pay stub, and which apparently, has information which is gonna verify that they're active military. And so we've asked the question, well, what if they're overseas, right? But there's a lot of information that's kind of, up in the air. So how many you get year 1 might be different than year 2 or year 3. And there hasn't been a lot of widespread, not that I've seen, news about this. Unless the military's sharing information. But I spoke to a couple of veterans just the other day.
Any final questions for Article 14? All right, well, that concludes our review this evening. Any final questions for the town this evening?
I'd asked the question, I believe, last meeting of the underspend at this time. I haven't seen an answer on that.
I didn't get that. I didn't get it to forward it. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
For the town
I think
underspend,
I
where they
captured
at?
that one, Brian. Sorry, I had the lights question was the only one I had captured.
Yeah, there's more of those now.
What was the question again, Brian? Sorry. I
Just
missed
wondering
it.
what the town's underspend is at this time.
Current underspend.
Oh. So, we can give you an update now. With the department heads, both Karen and I have been discussing and working with them. And this is a moving target, right? And what I want to be careful about is this does not account for weather-related items, which, like tomorrow, may change. But right now, we've got it down to about 156,000 without taking into consideration surprises or weather-related items.
Do we know how Mr. Brown's budget looks at this point? Is he near 100% on his items? So a potential, just before Christmas storm, would that cause it to go into the underspend, or is he still got
I had him a
some
little
money?
over.
Over budget?
Just a
I
little.
think I had him with a little bit of money left.
So
They did say they
It's
used
just-
a lot of salt the
Yeah,
other
it's
day.
hard to tell because they'll use overtime contractors.
about 25.
Yeah. And that's without this last one in it.
I think the largest.
Sunday and.
Sorry. I think the largest amount was, left was, police administration, which, you know what that is.
Do we have somebody in place yet?
That was my next question, is what are we down right now for officers?
Or staff, because
Three.
I think it's still the same, yeah, well, and 4 with the one on leave, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know the one on leave, but do we eliminate, but how many other officers are we short right now?
Three.
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 We hired a part-timer
Part.
the other night,
Yeah,
just to fill in some of the shifts.
yeah,
So 3 full-time officers we're down?
yeah.
And did we fill in the school resource
Well,
officer?
that's one of the 3,
That's one of them.
yeah.
So,
So if we fill those positions, if those positions had been filled,
We'd have.
you would have overspent.
Probably.
Yes.
well, that, because I was leading up to my next question, is that why we only have $156,000? Are we spending in overtime?
There's been an
So-
uptick in overtime because they have to cover shifts.
Right. Yeah. So when people have to backfill, then
And are we
you're
still
increasing their cost.
contracting out, police administrative oversight? At what point are we close to having that position filled again? Like, when can we stop paying a weekly, I think I can ask that question, like, at what point are we no longer gonna be having to pay additional funds for that?
We
No.
cannot answer that at this time.
That's absurd. It's been a year.
Any other questions for the town this evening?
So do the police and fire departments know that the budget committee cannot put forward a budget over the tax cap?
Yes.
So, because we keep receiving communications about their concerns about cuts. So have they asked the Board of Selectmen to suggest another place to cut instead? I don't want it to just seem like we're ignoring these concerns when our hands are tied and we're not getting any input on where else to cut that money from instead.
I think that's a fair statement. Like, I appreciated your memo, and I think I want to make sure town staff members, community members understand that those were really hard cuts that this group had to make this year, because with our backs against the wall with the tax cap, to Mr. Taylor's speech earlier on that, I think none of us wanted to make some of those cuts, but we had no choice. And so I think, I just want to make sure that's a message, that those were really hard cuts that we were kind of forced because of the tax cap that's in place. I just hope that's understood by town staff people, community members, that those decisions have an
So
impact.
I would encourage the select board to make a decision on the impact fees, using the impact fees for the fire station on your December 28th meeting, because that might potentially give us some leeway here.
Use them for what?
Paying down the bond like you did last year.
Yeah.
I asked about that before. I mean, it was done retro, and so it can be done again this year, and that would allow the budget committee to potentially support some of these warrants.
And if the selectmen had another idea of where else to make cuts,
Yeah.
we would absolutely be open to adding those budgets back into because I know with police especially, we had to cut pretty hard.
And I think, in fairness, to answer your question, I think they know, I know they know, that you have to come up with a budget that's under the cap. I think wherever you cut on the town's budget
It's gonna hurt.
is going to, yes. It is so lean. I mean, it really is. And the tax cap is a problem.
I mean, to your point, if we were fully staffed on the police side, we would be over budget for this year.
But there might be less overtime being expended.
Yeah, but I don't think it
Yes.
would account for 3 salaries.
And we also have additional expenses on the administration side we ought not have, that would probably alleviate some of the spending. Should that ever be resolved, then perhaps we can stop bleeding in some of those ways.
So when is the select board voting on the ARPA funds? Is that the 28th as well? Do you know?
I don't think we
They don't
scheduled the
have
vote on
to
that on the
allocate them, I
28th.
think, until next year.
Yeah.
They don't,
Right.
but they could.
They should to
right?
help.
Right, is anything being approved or proposed for ARPA in this budget? I don't think so,
Fire
but
Take it all.
what?
The fire truck.
The
gonna
fire
That
truck,
would be the only-
the only thing, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for the town?
Yeah, just my Christmas lights again. I haven't seen any resolve from that. Now we get 3 blow-ups to go along with that are on all day.
What?
3 blow-ups?
Yeah, Santa Claus,
I'd check to see if
Reindeer
my outlets are indoor, outdoor.
something else.
He's watching
I
you.
personally straightened up Rudolph, and also
Did
the
you
teddy
really?
bear, the teddy bear was on his back again.
Yeah. Santa Claus I've picked up a couple times, but yeah, they'll stay inflated 24/7, along with the gazebo, along with the fire department. And now you can add to that, the first 3 streetlights, when you come on Liberty Way on the left-hand side, are lit 24/7. So I don't know what's wrong with the streetlights, but
They're not supposed to be lit 24/7?
I wouldn't think so. Why would they? There's only 3, there's more than 3, but the first 3 are on all the time,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at like noon for them to be lit.
or 7 o'clock in the morning, or 8
Yeah.
o'clock in the morning.
That makes sense.
So I don't know if it's some timer that's not working right now, or,
So
I mean, I like Christmas lights.
I don't believe that so before what happened was the gazebo wasn't being used. It was like, I don't know, October or November when it was brought up to us. So it was just shut off. It wasn't actually repaired. And when then Spirit of Litchfield came through to put on the lights, and they just turned it back on. So, I mean, that would actually need a timer, a better timer put on it. There is some conversation, about the gazebo being replaced. So we are kind of holding off to do any electrical work or insert timers or things until we knew when that gazebo would be replaced, but,
Outdoor.
so that's the answer out there is, I don't know about the streetlights yet, but we'll
Outdoors?
find out.
Outdoors, yeah.
Well, I'm saying if you do a smart one, we can give them the controls.
All right.
I brought the fire department also, because their Christmas lights stay on all the time.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that ours aren't, are they?
I think we saw
Outdoor
yours
smart
were on a
plug.
timer.
20
We have a
bucks, get
timer,
2 of them,
yeah.
Give him the controls.
We looked after one meeting, I think.
I was gonna say, I know there was a timer out there. I'll check, cause the fire department told me they had a timer too.
I'm
So
just
I'll
telling you,
check.
outdoor smart plug, 3 sockets, $20 from Amazon. Get 2 of them. Give Brian access.
Carrie's buying it.
Yeah,
Or we just eliminate all lights in town. No one can use lights, we can't have them on the streets, we can't have Christmas lights.
It's done a day.
Well, you know, that's a good thing too. Bring back the old days when it was all nice and dark here.
All right, ladies, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and question answering. We appreciate it.
No
you're welcome.
street.
There wasn't many streets back then.
All right, any additional member input, new business this evening?
I had 2 updates, or 1 question and 1 update. The first thing is, the special audit RFP to review Fund 30, which is the Capital Projects Fund, has been issued. So if anybody knows any auditors or
So that was
accountants.
was that posted today?
So would
Posted
that come out of this year's
today.
budget? Or next, that would be paid out of the current budget?
Yes, I believe so. And So that has been issued, and we're hoping to get RFPs back by January 15th. That's the deadline. So that's out there. And also, the school board would like to know if the budget committee is in favor of annually approving an MOU where the school board would agree not to transfer any remaining sped money out of that account, and the budget committee would agree to not vote to cut the district presented sped budget.
Wait, say that again, sorry.
I know, it's kind of confusing.
Vote not to cut, yeah.
Right. So
They'll give it
we
back
voted
just
as a school board that we would not transfer money out of the sped budget, but that was under the assumption that there wouldn't be cuts to the sped budget, and there were cuts to the sped budget.
So there's always been cuts
So-
to the sped budget, and there's always been money returned. So I appreciate what the school board's requesting. One, it's not legally binding, so we can uphold our end, and it can still get spent. So
Or transfer.
or transferred, or whatever.
There's accountability with an MOU, and we're trying to make it more formal than a silly
I
handshake
think you
agreement
need
from
a
20 years
school
ago.
board policy that says we're not gonna do this, and we're gonna, you have your, in my opinion anyway, I can only speak for myself, there is a fund set aside to help offset special, excessive, unnecessary, unexpended things. I contend that the way we budget is in excess. I think we need to develop the correct algorithm based on your requests, what you actually need. I think if we continue to budget the way we budget, we should be funding 90% of your requested budget. So I would not be in support of no cuts. Personally, I think that you should still return it.
I think part of the cuts, and I'm happy to speak on this because at least for two of the ones that were proposed last week, I voted in favor of. One didn't pass, the other did. I was looking at the historical underspend there, and last year's was approaching $300,000, which was a lot of money. And I remember I asked this question. I certainly don't want to put words in Mr. Totten's mouth, but I brought up the point that the previous BA had said, he could still reserve the right to transfer those funds if there was an emergency that occurred, and Doug agreed with that. Like that could, so even if we had a policy, even if we had an MOA and MOU, there could come circumstances where, money is needed and special ed has 200K sitting there that it could be transferred to cover somewhere. And I think that's where I try to balance that with, let's try to get this as close as possible while still adhering to the fact that, there are unexpected times when a student may move into town that the school has to cover for that. I think we left plenty in there, knowing that there's also a reserve fund for this year. I'm not opposed to us having that discussion probably in the spring. I think like you and I were talking before the meeting, Tara, I think there's a lot of housekeeping stuff that as a committee we could do in the spring around how we organize things and how we share out reports and how things like this. When we have our 30-minute meetings in April and May, I think we can do some of that stuff, and I'm not opposed to that. I don't know if right now is the best time to do it though.
I don't like if you do this, we'll do this. I think you need to have your own policy. We should not be handcuffed. I don't feel like we've ever cut your budget unreasonably. I don't think we've ever put the school board in the position where they're unable to fund their needs. So I don't think that the concern is here. The concern has been, we've discussed it in these meetings, and then the money got moved. So to me, the policy should be at the school board level, and just, we keep doing more.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we can have both. I think we can have cuts and an MOU. And I think that, as far as special ed, I think, we have an obligation to perhaps review that one more time.
I agree.
Any other
Tara, anything else?
feeling?
Well,
No,
does
I
anybody
just
else
wanted to
have
get I don't feel like I have the consensus, because I heard from 3 people.
I think I've made it pretty adamant. I am
Yeah,
a
you
bottom
don't-
line budget person.
Yeah.
So, no.
But if we underspend, you wouldn't mind it coming back.
I'm willing to say that that's their responsibility. And then it's up to the taxpayer that if they feel that they do not return it, and the taxpayers feel they do, then they should vote out those school board members.
If we cut $200,000 off special ed,
Mhm.
and they still underspend, they can still give that back in, MOU or without MOU.
Sure.
Of course.
But in other words, they're not mutually exclusive. We can still do the cuts based on history and still do the MOU.
I got it.
Any other thoughts?
Kate, Brian?
I think the most responsible thing is just the school board should be building up their contingency fund. And then it could be a much leaner budget that we wouldn't, I don't think the school board would put forward an overinflated budget if they knew that they had $300,000 in a fund. That they might have to, then we can replenish that if the student does move in and we need to use it.
The thing is, you'll never get a number agreed on. That number was 100,000.
Right.
And then it was 150. Oh, if you give us 150,000, we'll do a lean budget.
I think there's 125 in there right now.
Yeah, well, if you give us $100,000, we promise we'll have a lean budget. It's all what the person at the table feels comfortable with, what the school board feels comfortable with.
No, well, if we can, they have a larger fund, like trust fund to pull from, then we can just use that 3-year average.
But what is that
Like we
number?
would any others.
I don't think you'll
No,
ever
the
get.
3-year spending average. That's
I
what I'm
just
saying.
no. I appreciate the spirit. I just don't think you'll ever get a number that people feel comfortable with. Then going lean and tight and just. I don't know. You're always gonna have a difference. People are never. Some people will feel that $500,000 not enough. So is $200,000 the right number? I don't know.
When the school comes in at $1.3 million additional, for the budget, I'm saying it's time for some sort of cap. Give them a target to shoot for, because that's just outrageous and unsustainable.
The reality is a cap would also provide more leverage during certain negotiations. Sorry, can't go above the cap.
It's unsustainable.
What did they say? It was something like over 800,000 of that, though. Maybe even more. Maybe it was 900 was
the voters-
contractual.
Yeah.
The voters voted on it.
Self-inflicted.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Right.
But we can't, blame them.
Well, the reality is, we don't directly
Can't
vote
blame the
on,
voters.
sure, we will agree to take a 14% increase in health insurance. Nobody factors that in as a possibility when they vote for, a 4.5% pay raise.
Right, but they're trusting that the negotiators
Right.
are looking out for the financial interest of the school district and negotiating in some of those protections.
Right, and they're not.
But if they don't, and we balloon, well, then again, it goes back to then we need to find new negotiators.
The buck stops with us, basically. We're the last, before they vote on any article, any budget. We gotta do our job.
I do have one question for the school board, and nothing that can be answered today, but Ms. Hirschberger, at some
Close my
point,
document. Hold on a second.
when you finish the non-public sessions around how the end of year is going to flush out, can we get an idea as to when that might be in terms of shortfall going to make it based on the cuts? Would that be February? Would that be March? Just some guidance on when you'd be able to let us know how the year end is going to shake out based on the non-public discussions you're having.
You're
So
asking for,
you
you're asking
want
for
to
a
know when,
timeline.
Timeline of, okay, we've come up with our plan,
Red or black.
which obviously you can't disclose right now because there's non-public items in there.
right.
But once the plan is ready and available to be made public, I'd be interested to know at what point will you be able to say, yes, we're okay, we made enough operational cuts, or we're going to have a shortfall and here's what our plan is to recover the shortfall.
But but we can't have.
Well, we are going to end the year in the black. Okay, that's going to happen. So I will ask about the timeline of the plan to close the gap right now and when
It could be.
it could be presented publicly. As Dr. Jetty indicated, we got a preview of it.
Right, but it's all
Yesterday.
non-public, so that's fine.
Yeah, so, that's more than we've had before. So,
But you still have change orders, and I've heard there's some sizable
Yeah.
change orders that could
Yeah.
be coming.
right,
I'm assuming
timeline of
that's all
plan to
factored
close the
into that.
gap made public.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay,
Okay, nice.
Got it.
If I can just
Yeah, go ahead.
comment to Mr. Taylor's remark as far as negotiators, if you're referring to school reps negotiating with the collective bargaining, the teachers, I've been involved with a couple of them. I was involved with the last one. I can tell you right now that it was very fair between both sides as far as how that was negotiated. And you weren't getting anything less than what you got.
But you can't have an open-ended, like, okay, you know what if health insurance goes up 20% next year? Like, you need to have the responsibility to say, look, you know what, we need to put some sort of limiter on certain items, otherwise, there's too much unknown that can happen that can completely
Understood, but I
throw
mean,
off the.
They'd already given in as far as changing their insurance.
Mhm.
And then same thing as far as the increases, where there was a larger amount that was requested and it ended up coming in lower than what they wanted. I understand what you're saying. That would mean going to them and saying, you're not gonna get a raise for the next 2 years because insurance is gonna be going up.
Well, no, it's just, okay, you know what, if insurance goes up more than X%, then at that point, it is going to be up to the employee to cover that overage.
And we try negotiating that.
Right, but this is my point.
Here's the thing,
You-
Scott.
yeah, at that point, then you say, you know what, I'm sorry, there's no deal.
And what's gonna happen is you'll start losing all your good teachers.
But right now, we got a runaway budget.
Well,
I mean, there needs to be a happy medium.
it's no different than towns though right now. It's contractual. I mean, you gotta pay for their increase, you gotta pay for the insurance increase. And we don't control that, or the school doesn't control that. Then you have electric costs, you have fuel costs. I mean, everything has gone up.
I get that, but at some point, there's certain areas that you should be able to negotiate. Look, you can't negotiate with Eversource that they're not gonna raise your rate by more than X. Okay, Mr. Totten's obviously doing a fantastic job of locking some of those things in, but when it comes to things that are negotiable, I don't think it's unreasonable to dig in your heels and say, you know what, if health insurance goes up more than 10%, then at that point, you need to offset the difference between 14% and 10%. It's the same exact thing that happens in the private sector. I don't get any choice. I get told in December by my HR department, your premium is going up by X. And I don't get a negotiation, and I don't get an unlimited cap that I don't
I
have
can
to
tell you,
spend
the
anymore.
private sector is totally different than the education. It is. It's just a totally different field.
Money is money.
You know, split the difference anyway, right, between the employee and the employer. Half and half.
All right, any additional member input, new business this evening as we approach the 10 o'clock hour?
Just a comment. The December 1st meeting, Mr. Taylor was talking about when the bubble's gonna burst in the town and people aren't gonna afford to continue to live here. And he was talking about seniors and having to make decisions between paying for their insurance or their medications and paying their taxes or paying their food bills or paying their taxes. And Brian, you said, time to sell your house.
I did.
Yeah, you did. And I listened to the meeting twice so I could hear it again.
Okay.
That's just such a disrespectful comment to make to a large portion of a community. It's really uncalled for. You shouldn't make statements
I
like
don't
that.
recall making a statement, to be honest.
You did. If you listen to it, it's right towards the end of Mr. Taylor's, when he starts talking about the medications and whatever. That's just very uncalled for somebody on this body to make something like that, a statement like that. It's-
Were you saying it sarcastically, maybe? In other words,
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Again, I don't even
it's
recall.
time to sell
saying
your
it.
house. In other words,
Right. But again, I don't even recall.
Tongue-in-cheek, basically.
Well,
Watch
he was
the
he was
video
talking about
and
people having to be able to move out of town because they can't afford to live here anymore.
Well, senior citizens,
Yeah.
and even me.
It's not just senior
But-
citizens, though.
But anybody, nobody should have to make that decision, and to have an elected member of a body,
Well, other
Take
people,
that
other
lightly.
people have said that at the deliberative.
Well, I would call 'em out.
At the deliberative, I think
yeah,
somebody.
but we're sitting at a table here, and we're the taxpayer, supposed to be the taxpayer's
Right.
friend.
But it's been stated before, and it is a rude comment if it's meant sincerely, like move out if you don't like it. I've heard that before.
I
Seen
would
it on-
call
I've seen it
call
on
somebody
Facebook
else
a
out on
lot.
that.
It is, unfortunately.
Just cash
Yep,
in.
but again, they're
And
not
I'm not
sitting
saying
at
that
a
as
table
a
here.
suggestion, I'm just saying that that's what I've seen.
You know, I mean, I've never, the school, I've never heard the school say something like that. I've never heard the selectmen say something like that. I never heard that from this body before the December 1st meeting. It's just, it's not the kind of comment that an elected member of this body should be making. It's just my opinion. Everybody can have their own.
Would you like to respond to that, Brian?
Again, I don't even remember making the comment, and if I did, then I certainly didn't mean to offend anyone or even suggest that they move out if they can't afford it. And I understand that it's not just the seniors, it's not just the elderly, it's, everyone is feeling the pinch.
Yep.
And you know what, there may be a lot of young people that'll be moving out because they can't afford it.
Just think about the number of people in town served by the local food pantry. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of names on those angel trees, and those are kids in town. So, yes, we need to be, just because we, or some of us can afford these increases, doesn't mean that everybody can. And that's why we really have to think about our neighbors and our fellow residents when we craft these budgets. There are a lot of things that I would love to have or love to ask for, but it doesn't mean it's fair to ask a struggling neighbor to pay for them. So I would encourage people over the next 2 weeks to really dig into the numbers. Are you comfortable selling the budget as it is to a struggling neighbor? Can you, not to the neighbor who's got the brand new car and is awesome and doing wonderful. They're not gonna feel the hit. But the neighbors that are struggling, whether you know it or not, are you comfortable asking them to pony up this kind of money? If so, vote for it. If not, really dig in and find the areas that make you a little uncomfortable.
I would feel better if the school budget was cut, bottom line cut, another $300,000.
That's not far off of what I'm,
That, to me, would give us a reasonable budget to present. Another $300,000.
That bring it to about a 500, 550 increase year over year?
570.
Okay.
You know, the tax cap for the town is 175. If you just do the math, you know, the tax target can be the result of that proportion.
We certainly have opportunities for motions on January 5th.
Wow.
that
I know of 50,000 that is coming out, was gonna be proposed.
I can know 150,000.
will be on just the warrant articles.
Yeah.
All right, any final member input, new business this evening?
Happy holidays.
Public input, I will open it for public input. I will close it for public input. And yes, I will say happy holidays to everyone. Hope everyone enjoys time with family, with friends. Has a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see everyone back here on Thursday, January 5th. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Made by Mr. Hayes, seconded by Ms. Douglas. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion carries 8-0-0, and we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.